Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Thursday, December 7th meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission. We have a pretty full agenda today, so we're going to try and move along. We will begin, however, with a roll call.
Commissioner Bottorff.
Here.
Commissioner Lind. Here. Commissioner Hagan. Here. Commissioner McPherson.
Here.
Commissioner Leopold.
Here.
Commissioner Friend.
Here.
Commissioner Alternate Schifrin.
Here.
Commissioner Caput.
Here.
Commissioner Rios. Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Bertrand.
Here.
And Commissioner Lowe.
Here.
Wonderful. We have a quorum. I'm actually going to begin with the consent agenda and then go into oral communications. We have a 9:30 scheduled meeting, so we're going to start with consent. If oral communications runs into the 9:30 meeting, we'll continue the remainder of oral communications later on in the meeting. The consent agenda is items 4 through 17. They will all be taken with a single action. They're considered non-controversial items. Are there any changes to the consent agenda first?
No.
Are there any directors that would like to pull or comment on an item on the consent agenda? Is there any member of the community that would like to address us on the consent agenda? Seeing none.
Consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Schifrin and a second from Commissioner Leopold. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. We'll now move on to oral communications. This is an opportunity for members of the community to address us on items that aren't on the agenda but are within the purview of the RTC. Again, we will need to finish oral communications for by 9:30 for our regularly scheduled or time certain meeting. Please.
Very good morning, commissioners, and thanks for being public servants, your staff as well. And my name is Jack Nelson. I spoke to your commission last month. What I had with me at Oral Communications was this piece of artwork, and I've brought it back, and the artist, the local Santa Cruz County artist who created this piece, is here with me also. And as I spoke with the chair, we're requesting to combine our 3 minutes each into 6 minutes. And last month, I spoke of the psychiatrist historian Robert J. Lifton having published a new book called The Climate Swerve, in which he says, climate change confronts us with the most demanding and unique psychological task ever faced by humankind. And what I said about this art was, here we're looking at an image of the Welcome to River Street sign on River Street, and it's underwater. Sea level has inundated Santa Cruz. And so this is us opening our minds to, is this going to be our future? And what I'd like to do is today, instead of talking about that psychological aspect, answer the question, well, how likely is this to happen and when? But before I do that, Russ? The artist has a few words to share with you also. This is the man who created this beautiful artwork.
Thanks, Jack. Great to be here talking with you. I'm Russell Bruchet. I've been a long-time Santa Cruz landscape painter, and I noticed that I had to go farther and farther to find landscapes that weren't affected by the human condition in some way. So I started down the slippery slope of becoming a social commentary painter when I started including our effect on the landscape. I have some points here. I'll go through them quickly because they're old news, but they're worth repeating. Virtually every scientist will agree that the Earth is warming up and that it's caused by human activity, that it's in the form of carbon that traps the sun's heat, causes the ocean to warm up, and the melting ice is raising our waters. And in our region, that's a pretty big concern. When you consider that 50% of our contribution to carbon is in the form of transportation, then being that this is called the Regional Transportation Commission, seems like a timely and appropriate place to present this concern. Considering public transit, I understand that we generate 50% of our contribution to carbon by transportation, and public transit is much more effective, fewer miles per passenger than private transit. So as I look at the map of Santa Cruz County, I see this swath going from one end to the other. It seems to me wise to explore all possible means of using this strip for public transit before it's given over to primarily recreational use. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack, you can see the remaining
yeah.
time there that was left on yours.
Sure. So just continuing, how likely is this to happen and when? Well, in some respects, like looking at the front page of the Sentinel today, great harm exacerbated by climate change is already here. So this is, the headline reads, Bel Air Fire joins the siege across California. This, if we don't act, this is our future. How are we doing on acting? Well, an old friend of mine, David, handed me this report recently. It's Climate Change Indicators in the United States, 2016, published by US EPA summer last year. And the chart that might be a little hard to grasp, that just blew my socks off, is one with the kind of nerdy, science nerdy title, Radiative Forcing Caused by Major Long-Lived Greenhouse Gases, 1979 to 2015. This chart shows a baseline of 1990 with a greenhouse gas index of 1, and then tells us how are we doing compared to that 1. Well, since 1990, that index has gone up 37% in this report. Last year, NOAA released an update. It's up to 40%. So what that is saying is the radiative forcing in the atmosphere that will heat our planet, heat our oceans, we've increased that factor by 40% since 1990. We are turning the dial on the oven up so fast, steadily and quickly, that Earth's natural systems, its biogeochemical systems, have not yet responded and reacted to that. We're in trouble. So what do we do? Cut carbon. Where does it get cut? 10% of the world's population emits 50% of the carbon, and we're it here in Santa Cruz County. And where does it come from? Well, as Mr. Boucher mentioned, over half of it is from transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Thank you, Mr. Boucher. Is there anybody else like to address us in oral communications? Good morning. Welcome. Feel free to line up.
Good morning. I'm Robert Stevens, and I'm on the Greenway Board, and I'm honored to be here. And I want to start out by thanking Ecology Action. You've received a letter from them. In particular, I want to thank Jim Murphy, their executive director, and Piot, their transportation director, because they've stated that this process that's going forward needs to be fair and open. And I think it's the only way our community is going to heal when we come out of this, if we have all the facts. And it's really up to you, commissioners.
Mr. Stevens, I'm just going to briefly interrupt you. I don't mean to be rude, but this is an actual item that's on today's agenda, so there will be an appropriate time to speak to it on that.
Well, I'm thanking Ecology Action. I'll move on. I want to say that I think it's up to you guys to really make sure that this is a fair process. And if it's not, I just don't think the community is going to move forward. And I know leaders often want to hide behind elections and things coming up. But in all honesty, you guys need to be leaders and step up and make sure this is fair. And now I'll just speak about my own personal thing. I rode my bicycle here today. I got here in about half an hour. We have some valid transportation solutions for our community, and you really need to look at all the facts to make sure that those come forward. I think buses are wonderful. I think you really need to look at the bus system. It's buses and cars that kill trains, and there's a good reason for it. And we have to make sure whatever we do, we can afford. Cost is primary, and we need action now. That's the problem. We can't wait for 20 years or a long period. When we start widening the freeway, that's going to create chaos. So how many of you took public transportation here today? I bet nobody raises their hand. So we need to, okay, one person. We need to fix that. Two people. We need to fix that so that it functions well. And if I took a train, I'd be down at the boardwalk walking or taking some other thing. So let's make transportation work. Let's get people healthy. That's why the doctors in our community support this. I'm not healthy because I ride a bike. I'm healthy because you could say bike riding makes me healthy, but it's really the fact that I ride a bike a lot, and it's a valid means of transportation, and our community needs to embrace this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking. Is there anybody else like to address us in oral communications? Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, how are you doing? This is not even close to being on the agenda. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your hard work that you do. And Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. And what I'd like to do for your hard work you've done all year, and in the Christmas spirit, is basically invite you to the Twin Lakes concert that we're having this weekend. 7 different performances from Friday evening through Sunday, and I have 12 cards here to remind you of that. So I hope you all show up, and I also wanted to save my time for later in the thing. So I just want to get this one out of the way.
You want to state your name for the record?
Oh, Michael Singh from Aptos, Campaign for Sensible Transportation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And also mention this to your staff or share with them.
All right. We'll try and keep it to transportation-related things, yeah. We'll talk about riding our bike to Twin Lakes, okay. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Ashley Wynn. Just comments on number 17 on the agenda.
We already actually acted on the consent agenda. Can you just be brief?
I'll be very brief.
Mr. Wynn.
Basically, I wanted to comment that the letter from Mike Watts on behalf of the La Selva Beach Improvement Association not only thanked Mr. Mendez, but also indicated that that the La Selva Beach members rejected the RTC's rail trail proposal. Second, there was a new report that came out on global warming and the effects on Santa Cruz County and the coastal climate's vulnerability. I'm here to just say science matters and math counts. Mr. Dundero's article in the Aptos Times said the rail proposal is theoretical, but in fact, we're getting ready to spend money on one segment in Santa Cruz City. And I have some photos here which illustrate the effect of global warming and erosion on the sand bluffs that undergird the rail tracks in La Selva Beach. I'd like to submit them as part of the record for the board to consider when further thinking about whether rail is feasible in this county, especially in light of the new Santa Cruz County Coastal Climate Change Vulnerability Report issued by the Moss Landing Marine Labs this past summer, which indicates that 1.4 miles of the rail in La Selva Beach is vulnerable to coastal erosion, and that the county and the city and other planning departments need to take into consideration the effect of sea level rising and coastal erosion in their planning decisions. And I'd be happy to submit this. I'm not sure if I can submit these photos to Mr. Mendez or who. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wynn. Thank you for coming. Morning, Mr. Peoples. Welcome.
Morning. Brian Peoples, Trail Now. I wanted to take a moment to recognize RTC staff, specifically Corey Coletti, on the phenomenal work she's recently done reaching out to the North Coast farmers and Trail Now, working with us to come up with a third alternative for the trail, the rail trail from Wilder to Davenport. Corey really did go above and beyond reaching out to the farmers, and you understand the situation in the farmers' mind. They're emotional. You know, they've been farming this property for years, and now a trail is coming through the middle of their farm. So Corey did a very good job reaching out to the farmers and working with the farmers. And I just wanted to appreciate and thank her for her work that she did. And I think the farmers were very happy with the approach and how she communicated it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Anybody else like to address us on items on the agenda? Good morning and welcome.
Hi, my name is Monique Kramer, and I'm not sure this is the appropriate time to talk about this, but it relates to what people are talking about, but this is the time I have, so. So I've sent a number of emails and letters and filled out surveys and all of that, and I really am coming from a place of wanting to urge that we stop spending money on studying rail transit. I just really feel like this is not a benign choice.
So
and
Ms. Kramer, you were correct that in wondering whether it was the right time. 'Cause it
Okay, now's
actually
not
isn't.
the right
Yeah,
time.
we have an agenda item today that will be discussing the UCS study, and all the letters that were about this issue are about that item. And
Okay,
so
then I'll
this-
go on record at this time just saying that I will try to come back and talk about it later.
the faster we get through this oral communications, the quicker it'll be for you to be able to comment on that item. So
All
that's
right,
all.
consider me to have finished speaking.
Thank you very much. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to make sure we follow the right process. Yeah. Good morning and welcome.
Hey, Zach, how you doing? I'm Tyler Fox, and I grew up in Aptos. I have traveled the rail corridor my whole life, and so I'm just curious, how many of you all have walked or traveled this whole rail corridor? Okay, so yeah, some of you have. As you guys may know, it's so narrow in so many places, and I just want to express the fact that when you see it firsthand and you see all these areas, it just makes no sense to have a train next to a trail in a lot of these places, and the money it would cost to try and widen this, all the infrastructure, all the retaining walls, everything else. And I think I'm speaking for a lot of people my generation, the younger generation, that would actually use this if it someday gets built, whatever happens. But I think we really need to look to our future and our kids and our grandkids, because this is an issue that once you do one thing, it's hard to go back and fix it once we move forward with a decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. So, and is there anybody else like to address us on items that aren't on today's agenda? This wouldn't be an ideal time to be talking about rail transit, given that is functionally an item later on the agenda. So, within the purview of the RTC. Good morning. Welcome, Ms. McNulty.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to join Jack Nelson's wonderful stance about trying to save our planet, or rather our humanity on the planet. I'm Gail McNulty, Executive Director for Santa Cruz County Greenway. Greenway is a growing group, 5,000 and rising, who want to spend our tax dollars wisely to build a wide, separated greenway on the rail corridor as the backbone of a carefully planned, protected bicycle and pedestrian network, while focusing our county's transit dollars on improving the Metro bus system. If spent wisely, our tax dollars can make this happen. I have 3 young children, and I'm a realist and an optimist. I need to believe that there are things we can do to help save this life on this planet, and I am confident that Greenway's goals are a huge step in the right direction. Our county alone, of course, can't solve climate change, but we owe it to our children and our grandchildren to do what we can to help. And it's time to get real. It's time to stop thinking about exorbitant, unfunded, huge infrastructure projects which our population density can't support. We need projects that can make a difference now. I will talk again during the Unified Corridor Study, but this is slightly outside of that, because in truth, the Unified Corridor Study isn't focusing on short-term solutions. It's not focusing on the solutions that people need to get out of gridlock and start making more sustainable choices now. We need to focus our transit efforts on making our already funded Metro bus system faster and greener. Buses serve more people than trains because they go where trains cannot. And it's simply not fair to watch buses sit in traffic. We need to do better, and we can. The Unified Corridor Study begins to touch on this, but it only touches a small portion of what we could be doing. Your constituents want alternatives to gridlock and healthy, sustainable choices, options, things that they can do now. Please prioritize people over cars and focus on things that we can do now to help build a more sustainable future. Unless we install a connected, protected bike network, we will never know how many people might choose bikes over cars when it's safer to do so. Our bike to school and work days offer a mere glimpse of how many people might choose biking and walking on a regular basis when it's safer to do so. There's a perception of safety in numbers, but we need an actual protected, separated, connected network in order to make that safety real. Our children and our future generations will thank you when you help our county to achieve working transit and a safe, affordable, connected Greenway network. Thank you.
Thank you. I do Just as a commentary, I think we're running really close to an item that's actually on the regular agenda, and we're going to be a broken record on this. This is for things that are not on the agenda at all, but are within the purview of the RTC. If you want to talk about the UCS, you want to even obliquely reference it, do it during that item, that'd be ideal. Please, we've got another 10 minutes before a time certain item. Good morning, welcome.
Buzz Anderson, and I think this is the appropriate time. I want to talk about safety in the corridor. I'm sure that all are in agreement that the Safe Routes to School program is an important component of our pedestrian and biking infrastructure in Santa Cruz County. It just so happens that many of our educational facilities are in close proximation to the rail corridor, starting with Pajaro High and Renaissance High in Watsonville to Bayview Elementary and PCS on the west side. Monterey Bay Academy, Rio Del Mar Elementary, Valencia Elementary, New Brighton Middle School, Del Mar Elementary, Shoreline Middle School, Cypress High School, Santa Cruz High School, Gateway School, and Spring Hills K-6 are other schools that are close to the old tracks. As well as such kid-friendly places like the Boys and Girls Club, Simpkins Swim Center, Depot Park, Jade Street Park, Aptos Park, and McGregor Skate Park. For older students and employees who commute, the rail corridor is not far away from Cabrillo and UCSC. I believe that the Wide Trail Greenway vision best supports the Safe Routes to School principles and offers the most safety for our children and young adults. Railroad tracks and bicycle tires are not a good match. Talk to any ER emergency care doctor and they will confirm that a high number of bike accidents and injuries in our county occur at intersections where the railroad tracks cross the streets. I myself have fallen at such a place. The current rail with trail plan leaves in place dangerous tracks at dozens of intersections in our community, especially in the heavily traveled urban areas. Also, the current rail with trail plan directs the bike riders into the Capitola Flats area because there is no room for a bike trail on the trestle if the tracks are left in place. There are other such places, such as the Aptos Crossing, where the trail deviates onto high-traffic surface streets. Let's keep our kids safe and remove the tracks for now so we can best use a wide, multi-purpose, less expensive thoroughfare for all kinds of transportation. Let's face it, a train is never going to happen. Please muster up the political will to quickly install the Greenway plan. Our prodigy will thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Good morning, Ms. Garrett. Welcome.
Good morning. I just got off the 71 bus coming here, and I was thinking years ago on that bus, people would have been smoking, and it would have been perfectly considered normal and acceptable. And I want to address secondhand radiation, like secondhand smoke. Both users and non-users are harmed. Now, smoking is banned on the buses. I'd like to see where people cannot be on their cell phones on the buses. And I have a card I'll pass out, public health warning. This is from Stop Smart Meters. It says on one side, protect yourself and those you love. And it points out that when we're in containers, metal containers like elevators and buses, et cetera, the radiation is enhanced, harming everyone in the area. So I'll give you this, and I want to give an example here. This is my detector of microwave radiation. Some of you have seen. This picks up from various sources. It's called an acousticom meter. This is a sound amplified. I get this on the bus. I get this here from Wi-Fi, the antennas on the roof. What I would like to see, like smoking, took years to ban. I remember living in Berkeley at the time. They were smoking over the food in the co-op stores in the 60s. We need to remove what is an endangerment, however we can, however popular it is. If it's harmful, it needs to be removed. And I would like to see the buses prohibit use of the cell phones on the bus. I'll pass these out to anyone, to your group and anyone who's interested. Thank you. It's a serious request.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Is there anybody else like to address this during oral communications before a time certain item? Seeing none, we will close oral communications. Just out of curiosity, are there any oral reports from commissioners on item 18? Seeing none, that'll be 18. Item 19 is the election of the 2018 RTC Chair and Vice Chair. I'll provide a brief oral report. The subcommittee consisted of myself, Vice Chair Cynthia Chase, and Supervisor Bruce McPherson. Vice Chair Chase declined the opportunity to serve as the chair coming year because she has a lot of other work commitments, but she was definitely the person that we had initially reached out to, and the recommendation of the subcommittee is to have Supervisor John Leopold as chair and Councilmember Ed Bottorff as the vice chair. Are there any other nominations from this board? And if not, would there be a motion for said slate?
Is it recommendation or nominations be closed?
That's right, nominations be closed.
I'd move that nominations be closed.
Second.
All those in favor of the nominations being closed?
Aye.
Opposed? So do we have a motion now for Supervisor Leopold as chair and Councilmember Bottorff as vice chair?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion from Norm Hagan and a second from Oscar Rios. Is there any public comment on this slate of officers for the coming year? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
It passes. No comment or no voting no on the slate?
No, on the slate.
Okay, so it passes with Mayor Johnson opposing. Director Dondero, is 5 minutes enough for your report, or should we try and get another item in before the 9:30 time certain?
Yeah, I can do mine.
Okay, then we'll move on to item 20, which is the director's report, which is an oral report. Mr. Dondero.
I just wanted to jump back quickly to number 3, additions and deletions. We do have handouts for item 20, 23, 24, and 25.
Thank you.
Okay. So very quickly, my director's report. First item, our Visualizing Sustainable Transportation in Santa Cruz County project. The phase 1 of this project is nearly completed. The OWL viewers have been taken down at both the Soquel and the Westside Santa Cruz installations. However, the pocket owls, which are viewable on your portable devices, such as a cell phone or an iPad or a tablet, will be available online through March 1st, and in the report we provided the link. It's on our website to where you can download the graphic material. For phase 2 of the project, our staff is evaluating lessons learned in the first phase and working with staff at the City of Watsonville to coordinate with their Complete Streets planning effort to begin soon in January. Second item, Santa Cruz rail tours. Some of you may have seen a small rail car out on the rail line. It's known as Daisy by its owner, Carl Arnett. Is Carl here? No. Daisy is a small, quiet, 6-passenger, self-contained rail vehicle. Carl entered, you gave him permission to operate on the line back in February of 2016. He entered into the appropriate agreements with Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay Railway and obtained approval from the Federal Railroad Administration. And he operated for a short period, but because Daisy's a little bit different from typical rail operations that FRA oversees and regulates, the FRA withdrew its approval and instituted additional requirements. So recently, Carl was able to fulfill those additional requirements imposed by the FRA, and he's now ready to begin operations once again. Daisy's been out on the branch line recently between Santa Cruz and Aptos, conducting inspections, maintenance, and trial runs. And we provide the website and the email address in the report if anybody wants to contact Carl for a ride. He can take up to 5 passengers on a trip if you want to see the rail line. Once the grade crossing work and track work is done at Trout Gulch Road in Aptos, he'll be making trips between Davenport and Manresa State Beach. And page 2 has a few photographs of Daisy. And the next item is we'd like to thank one of our longstanding staff members, Rachel Morricone. You're all familiar with Rachel. She's presented at many meetings in the past, and this is she's now passing the 20-year mark with service to RTC. I have to say we had trouble fitting all this on one certificate, but I will read what it says. 20 amazing, and presented to Rachel Morricone in recognition of 20 amazing years of outstanding public service with the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission, professionalism representing the RTC locally and at the state level, genuine passion for sustainable transportation, superb patience and dexterity working with local project sponsors and state funding authorities to ensure that Santa Cruz County obtains the funding that it deserves and projects are delivered. Superior leadership on numerous diverse projects, including bicycle plans, traffic monitoring, van pool incentive program, rail study, Measure D, the regional transportation plan, and exceptional work on the RTIP, which you will see her perform on today, coming on the agenda. So, Rachel, thank you so much for your dedicated service to the RTC. And then one last item, in the back of my report, I've attached a few pages from fixourroads.com. This is regarding the attempt that's being mounted to repeal Senate Bill 1, which, as you know, was just passed earlier this year to fund transportation. I won't read through these, but there are some false informations being put out by the people that are behind this repeal effort, and we expect it to be on the November ballot next year. So hopefully this will be helpful in answering any questions you might have coming from your constituents regarding Senate Bill 1. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Sender. Are there any brief questions of the director on his oral report? This is a non-action item. All right, we have a 9:30 scheduled item, and we actually are going to hit it on time. The 9:30 public hearing is the adoption of the 2018 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP. We have a staff report, a resolution, progress projects recommended for funding, amendments to previously approved projects, and a summary of applications received, as well as written comments received. Morning, welcome, Rachel. Congratulations on 20 years.
Good morning, Commissioners. Not quite half my life spent at the RTC, but it's been always interesting to work for this agency and everyone that I get to work with, including all of the project sponsors who submitted outstanding applications, which we'll be discussing right now. So today before you is the biennial action for the Commission to adopt its Regional Transportation Improvement Program. The RTIP is the document where we keep track of what projects have been funded by the Commission and ensure that everyone's meeting their schedules, and it's also our submittal to the California Transportation Commission of our proposal for our region's shares of State Transportation Improvement Program funds. So today you will be discussing which projects to possibly receive up to $22 million worth of state and federal funds that are available for programming right now. These include some new funds that weren't here 2 years ago because Senate Bill 1 was passed by the legislature in April. We now have a more stable state transportation improvement program. Some of you may recall that in 2016, instead of programming new projects, the California Transportation Commission deleted $750 million worth of projects. And so we are fortunate to now have Senate Bill 1 providing stability to this program and providing up to $17.5 million for programming today. So this is a huge change from 2 years ago when we lost $7 million of STIP funding. For Senate Bill 1 also includes a new program that rewards counties that have passed local sales tax measures and other fees. And so through that local partnership program, we have about $600,000 available for this year and next year combined to program. And our proposals for those funds are due to the California Transportation Commission by the 15th of this month. Senate Bill 1 also increased the amount of funding available for transit programs through the State Transit Assistance Program and the State of Good Repair Program. We have about $975,000 worth of those funds that are based on the population share of our county's portion of those funds available in fiscal year 17-18. And there's another staff report that talks a lot more about that state transit assistant funding. And then we also have a little bit of funding from the federal government. It seems to be dwindling every year how much of that money comes to California, but we do have about $3.5 million from the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program that's available for programming right now. The STIP funds are a 5-year program of funding, so those funds are available through fiscal year 22-23, and so some projects will not be receiving those funds immediately, but we're looking at putting those funds on projects that might not all need the money in the next 12 months. So in total, about 85% of these $22 million worth of funds are at risk if Senate Bill 1 goes away. So the decisions today are important, and we're working closely with project sponsors to make sure they deliver these projects as quickly as possible. But I do just want to note that things could change over the next 12 months. So the decisions we make today might be affected by things that are outside our control. The Regional Transportation Commission issued a call for projects for these funds back in September, and we held workshops with applicants. The applications were sent to nonprofits, to cities, the county, transit agencies, paratransit providers, and others that tend to provide transportation services in our county. And then the applications were due on October 23rd. We received 36 applications asking for about $38 million worth of funds, which is, of course, more money than we have. And so then we went through the process of evaluating these projects based on criteria that was established by the Commission at your September board meeting and is also listed on page 3 of the staff report. We focused in on projects, how many people are going to be served by different projects, are they helping maintain our existing transportation services and infrastructure? Are they helping reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? Are they improving safety and health for our community? And are they changing the number of vehicle miles that are traveled? Along with the other criteria was also taken into consideration. So attachment 4 of the staff report provides a summary of all of the different applications. It includes information, the project description, some of the benefits that were identified for each of these projects, shows you how many people are anticipated to use that facility or program each day. And all of that was taken into consideration. All of the applications are also on our website, and there's a link to that page in the staff report. So the staff recommendations, which start on attachment 2, page 11 of this item, focus on projects that address those criteria that were identified by the Commission. The RTC's committees reviewed staff's preliminary recommendations and made their own recommendations at their November meetings last month. And staff refined its recommendations, taking into consideration that input that we received from the Bicycle Committee, the Elderly and Disabled Transportation Advisory Committee, and the Interagency Technical Advisory Committee. Some of the conditions that are identified in attachment 2 also reflect recommendations that came out of those committee meeting discussions. So with that, there are some projects that we are recommending for partial funding. We have discussed this with project sponsors, and in all instances, project sponsors will be able to scale the size of their project to match that funding. In a lot of cases, this is for roadway repair projects and reconstruction. So instead of being able to do 9 miles of Zion-T Road, the county might be able to do, 6 miles of Zion-T Road. Instead of Metro buying 5 new buses, they'll be able to buy 1 new bus. So it was possible to scale a lot of these different projects so that we could address the multimodal needs of our community and make sure that everyone in the community is hopefully benefiting from some of this funding. Overall, for the staff recommendation, about 30% of the funds that are recommended are for repairing our existing local roads, especially in the unincorporated areas of our county. 16% of the funds we're recommending go for transit projects, including bus replacements and refurbishing existing buses, as well as about $1 million for a placeholder item, which may be used on bus replacements, but Metro will return to us at the January board meeting to discuss exactly which project to put that state transit assistant funding on. There's also a lot of regionally significant projects in here. About half of the funds are going to projects that serve a large number of people in our community that are traveling, whether it's on buses or highways, all over the place. And then about 20% of the funds are going to be used on bicycle and pedestrian components of projects. We also, while it wasn't a criteria for our program, we did look at, once we had developed our recommendations, how it compared to the population of our county. And well, it's not a formula program, and it's not a formula program by federal rules. We did happen to get a pretty decent mix that's very closely lined up with our population split in the cities and the unincorporated areas of the county for projects that are recommended that were sponsored by those agencies. Other options today, the commission does not have to program all $22 million. The commission could instead decide to reserve some of these funds for future programming. Staff does not recommend that at this time. We have such a huge backlog of needs in our community, and we have citizens that really are needing these projects, tired of hitting potholes, wanting safer bicycle routes, needing to replace transit buses as quickly as possible. So we don't recommend that. And partly the reason we don't recommend it is because if we don't program all of our STIP share right now, it will probably be 2023 or later before those funds will be available to our county. So that's another reason that we wouldn't recommend that. I do want to just mention that the California Transportation Commission does have the final say on how that any of the projects that are proposed for state transportation improvement program funds are spent, and the CTC will be making its decisions on those funds at the end of March of 2018. And so for all of these projects, we would be on hold for them until we see what the CTC is recommending for funds, and then at that point project sponsors could start initiating work. I do want to just mention that the CTC is also in charge of the local partnership program formula funds. Just yesterday, CTC staff requested at a statewide meeting that regions propose no more than one project for the local partnership program funds, and then backed away and said, okay, maybe two. So this is a reason why this is yet another reason why we wouldn't recommend splitting the local partnership program funds by some sort of formula based on Measure D. We're instead, because those funds come with some slightly cumbersome rules and paperwork, we want to make sure that we are focusing them on projects that, one, can be delivered before November of 2018, and then also just on slightly larger projects that can handle the added paperwork. Staff has been working with Metro and the County of Santa Cruz to identify 2 projects for those LPP funds, and I think we're pretty close to finalizing that, but we'll be working with them after the board makes its decision on which projects to fund overall on exactly the color of funds. The staff recommendations also include some amendments to some projects that the commission previously approved for funding, and those are included as attachment 3. These are essentially updating project information to reflect the very latest cost, schedule, and scope information for those projects. So the next steps, today we recommend that you hold a public hearing, consider the public comments that were submitted. Some of them are listed in attachment 5, as well as there's an addendum with some additional comments. A lot of the public comments that we've heard received so far focused on the Aptos Village project, the Open Streets program, some metro projects, the Pacific Avenue sidewalk project, and projects in Watsonville. After that, we recommend that you adopt a resolution approving the staff recommendations, which are attachments 2 and 3, and then projects can begin work starting this spring. And then any project that has bicycle and pedestrian pedestrian components will go back to our bicycle and elderly and disabled transportation advisory committees for review and input during the design phase of those projects. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do have some graphics of some of the projects that were proposed. I didn't go into detail on any of the projects, but if you would like me to, I'd be happy to. And also, I think almost every project sponsor is here if there's some detailed questions about their projects. So.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any brief questions from commissioners before we open up the public hearing to the community? Commissioner Leopold.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. In the description of the LPP funds, the Local Partnership Program, you end the paragraph saying several CTC board members have expressed interest in modifying the guidelines and reducing formula distributions to sales tax entity in future cycles. Could you just say a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. So the Senate Bill 1 includes about $200 million, it includes $200 million a year for the local partnership program. Initially, the California Transportation Commission had proposed to put 75% of those funds allocated based on a competitive basis. Regions with sales tax measures, including ourselves, argued that that didn't make sense, that it should be a formula program. In the past, there was a Proposition 1B included a very similar program where 95% of the funds went out by formula. So this was a big switch from what had been before to reduce it to 25%. So we were able to get 50% of the funds to come out by formula this time. That said, there are many CTC board members who are still interested in, once again, changing that so it's more the state deciding how the funds are spent rather than really rewarding self-help counties.
Okay. Yeah. Something for us to keep an eye on and maybe lobby for at the appropriate time.
Absolutely.
And the other question I had was on the funding recommendations. You have the recommendation, the mid case, I think it is, and the worst case.
Sure.
And could you describe what would have to happen to consider the worst case scenario?
So the way the STIP is set up is there are what's called a county minimum, which is what the CTC is mandated to allow us to program. And in our case, that's 4.7 of the $17.5 million. And so if the CTC were to decide they're not going to give us our full formula share of funds this cycle, that would be the worst case scenario. And so what staff did was, in anticipation that that could happen, although I am advocating heavily at the state level, especially with Senate Bill 1, we want to make sure that everyone's seeing some of that money back into their own communities. The worst case scenario is, in the event the CTC starts going that direction, it happens very quickly, and there's not time to come back to our board with future action. Sometimes when they're putting forward their staff recommendations will come out at the end of January, or end of February, and then they're adopting their final recommendations on March 28th. So it would provide staff with some level of guidance on the priorities if the CTC does not allow us to have our full share.
But with the passage of SB 1, I mean, I know that there are elements out there who are threatening to put something on the ballot and pass something that the earliest that would be June, maybe, if not November. So is there? I'm just trying to get some sense of likelihood of the worst case scenario.
I don't think the worst case scenario is going to happen. I think that what might happen is we won't get our full $17.5 million, but. And that might be because there are some other counties in the state and Caltrans projects that are very large that have some cost overruns, and the CTC will feel pressured to put more funding on those projects, and it would be at the expense of other counties.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner McPherson.
Yeah, just a comment. I just want to reaffirm my thanks to Santa Cruz County voters, more than 2/3 of which passed Measure D. This, as was stated, is going to allow us over the next 2 years to get $600,000 that otherwise we would not have received, because we have become what's known as a self-help county, in essence taxing ourselves for road improvements, so the state will be able to give us some support funding. So thank you to the voters of those of you that supported Measure D. It's critical in this whole outcome that we have here, and the future for our meeting some of our transportation needs.
Thank you. Commissioner Bertrand.
Yeah, I have two questions. On the project evaluation, is this broad enough to consider new technologies as they emerge?
If they help improve safety or reduce traffic congestion or provide access to more types of transportation, I would say yes.
Okay, that's sort of what I thought.
Yeah.
So for new technologies, that may not be apparent at the onset. So as we look at project evaluation, I'd like staff to consider trying to give some weight, appropriate weight, to things that may be appearing on the horizon. We don't know what the effect's going to be, so it might be worthwhile doing some work and research and projects in that area. The next one, I was, when I lived in the valley, San Lorenzo Valley, excuse me, I used Empire Grade Road quite a bit, and in the winter, that's quite a safety issue. And I know money's been given to paving and sealing and stuff like that. So in the wintertime, that's really quite an issue. You're absolutely right. There's not a lot of people that use it, but it does have a safety concern during the winter. Thanks.
Are there any other commissioners with questions before we open up the public hearing? Yeah. Commissioner Caput.
I want to thank you for your report too, and I'm just trying to figure out some funding here on, let's see, Green Valley, 2320. That would be, is that also related to safe routes to schools?
Can you, where there's a number sign, can you tell me which project number you're talking about or what the project title is?
That would be the one at item 33, Highway 152, Houlihan College.
Yes, that project is located right there near, is that Lakeview Middle? I can't remember. So yes, it does provide bicycle and pedestrian facilities right there. There are a lot of kids walking in the roadway right now. It's also being done, there's a secondary project in that area as well. But yes, this project is.
It's not in here, but I think it's related to Caltrans, the project on 152, adding sidewalks from Wagner to Houlihan.
Correct, they all link together.
The only problem is going to be that bridge, right? The bridge is whether or not it's wide enough.
Yeah, and I think that Caltrans and the County Public Works Department have been working very closely to try to resolve those challenges.
There you go.
Good morning. Steve Wiesner, Department of Public Works for the county. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about that project.
You bet. The bridge will be a problem there at Houlihan and College as far as the sidewalks go and as far as the ADA.
There are some geometric constraints on the bridge, but that's outside of the limits of the intersection improvement project that we're asking your commission to fund today.
It's more related to the Pajaro River?
Correct.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
and there is Safe Routes to School money as well on the 152 Houlihan project, so you were right in that. Yeah.
That's great. And then the events for, real quick, the events for closing the streets there, that would be 2317.
It's project number
12,500 per event. That's Watsonville and Santa Cruz.
Correct. The Open Streets proposal is for 4 events, 2 in Santa Cruz and 2 in Watsonville, 2 different years.
So 12,500 times 2 for the Watsonville area?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then lastly, let's see here, construction. It mentions the word crosswalk illumination. Is that, that would be pedestrian activated?
Typically, those are pedestrian activated, and then the crosswalk is illuminated so that cars are alerted that there is a pedestrian in the crosswalk.
It's not green, yellow, and red. It's just illuminating the crossing. Maybe a flash.
I'm not sure which project specifically you're referencing, but yeah, that's typically how it works. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lynn, did you have a question?
A comment on one of the questions asked on new technology. In the Metro's call for projects. One of the things that has been included is some new technology with the phone app that would be developed to let passengers know if there's delays and an ETA of buses and vehicle locators. So there are some new things included in that Metro proposal that will help our passengers and riders too. So.
Thank you. Now we're going to open up the public hearing on this item. This is an opportunity for members of the community to address us specifically on the proposed allocations with the RTIP. You'll have 3 minutes to address us. You'll have a green light that I think actually goes straight to red on this situation. Good morning and welcome back.
Thank you, Brian from Trail Now. I first want to congratulate Rachel on her 20 years, and you all might not appreciate her as much as when I tell you that 20 years ago, she's the one that brought me into working with the RTC. So good job, Rachel. So you might want to take that plaque back. Anyways, I don't have a lot of comments on I appreciate all the work that the subcommittee did on the formula. The one thing I want to throw out there is we're really looking forward to when all you come out with the Measure D strategy, the bond, and everything. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Would anybody else like to address us during this public hearing? Now's your opportunity. Please step forward. Feel free to line up, too, if you want to expedite. Please feel free.
Why don't you go first? I have materials.
If somebody could step forward.
Go ahead, please. I have materials I'd like to give you. I'll take to expedite things.
Good morning, Mr. Nelson.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity. I'm Jack Nelson, and rather than comment on individual items here, I'd like to try to just step back and look at the big picture. And there is, in fact, a picture in your staff report, and a pie chart. Members of the public may or may not know that this is in the agenda packet that's available online at Sccrtc.org. So I'm looking at this pie chart that shows by transportation mode where the money goes in the RTIP. And members of the public may know that you adopt this plan every year. It's updated every year. And so this year we have California SB1 providing some more money to make this plan. And what I see when I look at this is Highway 1 auto 20%, local road auto 9%, local roadway preservation 30%, and then there's 11% pedestrian, 16% transit, and a few really tiny slices. What I'm seeing is the automobile is still taking the majority of funds here. There's a 1% slice for transportation demand management. That is actually your congestion solution. Building more road doesn't fix congestion, but we can see in other jurisdictions and other countries, for that matter, that transportation demand management, which helps people find ways to get out of their cars, is the most effective, cost-effective way to deal with traffic congestion. But there's another Senate bill I'd like to mention that's a year old. It's SB 32. It was signed by Governor Jerry Brown in September last year, and it calls for increasing the rate at which we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in California, 40% by the year 2030. So that's 12 or 13 years from now. So I'm wondering, how does this if I peel this pie chart off and look at the back, I'm looking for where are the greenhouse gas emissions reductions to meet that other SB, the SB 32 I just mentioned. That's the one that's going to determine our real future, and the people of the future, I think, will be more concerned with how did you act on SB 32 than how did you act on SB 1. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome back, Ms. Garrett. Public hearing on the RTIP. Good morning.
Good morning. When I was listening to the presentation just moments ago about criteria for where projects should be prioritized, I heard the phrase, is it serving public safety and health? Public safety and health. And the Aptos Village project and all the taxpayer money that's going into it I think does not serve public safety and health. And titles of things, I think, are often misleading. Aptos Village Project sounds like it's a village. I'm in that area often. I think a more appropriate title is Aptos Pillage Project. And when I think of the term development, kind of has this aura of how beneficial it is. But is it development or is it desecration and despoilment? I think it's the latter. And all the trees that were cut down, the congestion, multiple problems with this project, the fact that there was never an EIR, and why should the people pay over $3 million for a project that benefits the developers? That's inappropriate. That's a travesty. Other developers in the county have to pay for their own road improvements. And as I go on the bus, I don't see improvements at all. It makes me feel like crying each time to see this enormous San Jose, Silicon Valley looking project in what used to be an attractive rural area with its own little character of a real village. So I think money should not go to that project at all. You have other projects that could benefit. And I feel a sense of outrage and like, you know, being betrayed that our public money should be going into projects that really benefit the public truly. And I don't see this. So please do not grant that money to this Aptos, what I feel is Aptos Pillage Project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to address us on the public hearing regarding the RTIP funding? Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Friend, members of the Commission. My name is Murray Fonts. I'm a principal engineer with the City of Watsonville. Lowell Hurst is an alternate council member representative to the Commission today, and he would love to be here. In fact, he comes and often shares his thoughts, but he couldn't make it. I'd like to comment on traffic as he would have, were he here. I lack his booming voice and his unique hairstyle, but I am familiar with the drive to and from Watsonville and Santa Cruz. When I checked Cruise 511 this morning at 7:30, I saw that the 18.5-mile trip from Watsonville Public Works Department to the county building would take 43 minutes, an average time of 26 miles an hour. Cruise 511 showed that the traffic slowed down just before Larkin Valley Road, where it goes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes, and it picked up again at the Soquel Drive overcrossing, where the recent improvements by the RTC widened the road to 3 lanes. I'd also like to speak on behalf of the City of Watsonville and express support for the recommendations by staff on this funding measure. There are 4 projects that provide improvements in the City of Watsonville, including 3 projects that include multimodal improvements to major arterial roads. Freedom Boulevard, Green Valley Road and Airport Boulevard are scheduled to be constructed next year and have been funded previously by the RTC, but because of escalating costs and scope change, there was a need for additional funding. And 2 of the recommended funding will supplement those projects and allow them to move forward. A 3rd project includes Freedom Boulevard with multimodal improvements that will benefit bikes, pedestrians, transit, and the automobile. And the final project is a bicycle improvement project that will provide improvements throughout the City of Watsonville. There are also projects that are being recommended that benefit multiple agencies, including the City of Watsonville. The Open Streets events hosted by Bike Santa Cruz County will be in Watsonville and Santa Cruz. Every Day is Bike to Work Day by Ecology Action. the refurbishing and replacement of buses and equipment by Santa Cruz Metro, as well as the Cruise 511 and environmental documentation for Highway 1 projects by the RTC. Again, the City of Watsonville expresses support for this funding and recommends that the Commission approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurst will be proud. Good morning, Ms. Steinbrenner. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Becky Steinbrenner. I'm a resident of Aptos Hills and am forced to go through the Aptos Village project area every single day. I'm here to protest the expensive improvements, so-called improvements in the Aptos Village at the taxpayer's expense. For the audience here, the documents that I passed out earlier included 10 pages of signed petitions that I circulated at the Cabrillo Farmers Market. There is an additional 100, that include 73 on the signed petitions and 127 protest votes registered online on the protest petition. It includes the flyer that I passed out during the farmers market signature gathering, a copy of the Barry Swenson Builder Aptos Village card advertising safe railroad crossings as a selling point of their development, but making no mention at all of public transportation being adjacent to it, and also 2 pages of county documents that I obtained through Public Records Act request, outlining the many, many extensive concessions the county has already given Barry Swenson Builder for this project. I'm happy to give these to the public at any time, but I'm not allowed to put them here. So you have before you 200 protest votes for this further funding of project number 25 for your consideration. The county has already submitted to you 2 years running, 3 years running now. This is their highest priority for the county projects. Your board has already given this project $1.2 million. Which included a contingency for last year's funding that bicycle racks be included. When the county shifted 100% of that $650,000 last year to fund the Phase 1 Trout Gulch intersection improvements, the bike racks went away. They are not there. I do not see any bike racks included in the project before you, but I've not been able to get a good close look at them because they were denied I was denied access to them by Public Works. I question if this really reduces greenhouse gases. I don't see Class 2 bike lanes on SoCal Drive with the improvements before you. And that was a concern for the bicycle committee. I don't see bike racks there. And there's no mention, I'm sorry, I'm really scared. In closing here, I'm almost out of time. I'm all about solution, and I know how things work here in this county. I'm asking you to put contingencies on this funding too. Force the developer to put in a second bus stop near Aptos Creek Road that is level and will be ADA accessible. The one that we've paid for now will not be because of the 100-foot long 5% grade.
Thank you, Ms. Steinbrenner.
And bike racks at Aptos Village. Please, there's no place for people to park.
Thank you.
Their bicycles when they are reducing greenhouse gases.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Supervisor Friend and Commissioners. My name is Yannicka Strauss. I'm the Executive Director of Bike Santa Cruz County, and we applied for $50,000 for 2 open streets events in 2018 and 2 in 2019 in both Watsonville and in Santa Cruz. And this is a request for partial funding, so we would be sourcing 50% of the total cost from other sources, like the Caltrans Active Transportation Program and the City of Santa Cruz. We greatly appreciate RTC staff for their recommended funds, and we also urge your support for all bike and ped improvements in the City of Watsonville, because there's great need in Watsonville, and also for Ecology Action's Every Day is Bike to Work Day program. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Piet Cannon with Ecology Action. I was speaking on item number 2, and that's the Ecology Action Bike Commuter Program. And I'd like to thank staff for recommending that at $50,000, and also thank Rachel for her great work on this RTIP and, her 20 years of service. Amazing work she does in terms of moving around transportation funds. So in terms of these transportation funds, as Commissioner Leopold said, there's 3 different scenarios. So, the scenario for best case scenario, some $22 million coming to the RTC and our county, our program is funded well for that. And then for the mid-case scenario, also it's well funded. With the worst case scenario, which is still a possibility, it has 0. And, we'd like the Commission to reconsider that. This program is a direct service program. It goes to large employers. So Ecology Action has been working with large employers for some 30 years through our Bike to Work Day program. So we would go to large employers and work with them and their employees. And that's a pretty good relationship in terms of trying to reduce peak hour travel for people that can bike to work, that live close enough to their home, to work, to make that bike trip. And so bike share already has a high percentage in Santa Cruz County. This program would track the bike commute trips. It would have incentive programs internally at the work site for those trips. It would give those employees workshops on bike commuter resources, what kind of equipment to use. It would address safety. And I think safety is a key in terms of the Elder and Disabled Committee. They said they weren't so sure about this program, but we're going to tell cyclists, hey, there's rules about best practices. You defer to pedestrians. You don't ride on sidewalks. So we actually have a program that addresses the concerns of that committee. We also feel like this program would be beneficial in terms of leveraging what the cities are doing with infrastructure. So this is kind of a social infrastructure program that supports the hardscape that's going in, the new bike program, the new bike lanes that are going in, and other facilities. So we'd like you to consider moving $30,000 of funds from other sources, a small fraction of the money that's being allocated today in the worst case scenario, so we could still move on with this program if the worst case scenario does come to pass. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Is there anybody else during the public hearing? Good morning, Ms. McNulty. Welcome back.
Thank you all. First of all, I would like to commend staff for the very inspirational way they have shifted funds around and managed to pull it together and do things the best that we can with limited resources. What stands out when I heard Rachel's report really was the words worst case scenario, and the fact that it is something, despite the fact that we did pass Measure D, we are still shuffling funds around and trying to figure out how to pay to fix potholes and to improve our Metro bus system and do the things that we need to do in our county. And I realize I personally, and I'm also very grateful to Ecology Action and Bike Santa Cruz County for all the work that they are doing to advocate for bike safety in our county and to try to make it safer to walk and bike and get around in a wheelchair and all of these things. It's all tremendous, but it's swimming upstream. We are swimming upstream in a car-centered community when we try to make these changes. I realize that when you try to put in protected bike lanes, you get pushback from business owners and property owners and people that are worried about losing parking. And I know that it's not an easy thing to get around. And I know that improving our Metro bus system isn't it doesn't look shiny and popular. It doesn't seem like maybe the most important thing that will win you votes. But it's a social service that we need to maintain and we need to improve. And it is our transit system that is currently funded and can reach the most number of people in our county. And it saddens me, quite frankly, when I hear that Metro is asking for some things and we're giving them only a portion of that. Because quite frankly, I think Metro is where we need to be putting our transit thinking and our transit funding. It is the most doable, practical solution for our county, and it going hand in hand with a protected bicycle and pedestrian network, a serious, connected, well thought out network that begins with the best trail we can possibly build for the least amount of money and the lowest environmental impact on our rail corridor, and connects to our major employers, our schools, our universities, our popular destinations. This is the solution that can get people out of gridlock. And I suggest we look to a concept of urban prototyping. New York City. 6 years' time, under Mayor Bloomberg, he was a business guy. He came in and he was not afraid of failure. He said, you know what, let's try things. Let's call it an interim solution. Let's get as many protected bike lanes out there as we can, because we know we have to fix our subway system, not unlike our highway system. And in order to do that, we're gonna have to close down tunnels. So let's put bike lanes in as fast as we can. We'll call them temporary. That way, when businesses complain and people complain, we can say, well, we'll take it away if it doesn't work. But you know what? It worked. And in the neighborhoods where they did that, there were neighborhoods where they put these things in and business doubled. You know, these things are good for business. They're good for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else like to address this during the public hearing? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Congratulations, Rachel. I'd like to put in my endorsement for items number 1 and 2, the open streets events in Watsonville and Santa Cruz. If you've been to an open streets event, as I have 4 out of the 5 past years, the one in Santa Cruz, you see a lot of happy people. They're riding their bikes, they're out in the fresh open air, they're just on a street with no danger of automobile traffic. They're really having a good time. It's a wonderful event to attend, whether you ride a bike or not. And I'd like to also endorse the second item, Bike to Work Day. A lot of people do ride their bikes or try to from, say, Aptos to downtown Santa Cruz or the 41st Avenue area. If they could have more incentive for that, it would be better. When people get on their bikes and out of a car, that's one less car, one fewer car, less car on the highways. So 2 of the most hardworking organizations here are Bike Santa Cruz County and Ecology Action, and I urge you to support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address us?
Yes, my name is Peter Stanger. I live in La Selva Beach, and I'm concerned that we're not spending funds on developing a safe route for bicyclists to get from South County to North County. You now have Measure D, you now have the state funding, and now's the time to be putting in some infrastructure here. We need some safe routes to get here. Even the current routes, the bike lanes along San Andreas, for example, are covered with sand and debris. The bike lanes along Soquel in the 2nd District also are covered with logs and debris. I try to report it into the counties and the Public Works, and I don't get any results out of those reports. We're not even maintaining the bike trails that we have today. We need to have a route that we can get people on bicycles, clean bicycles, from South County to North County, and there's none of that happening here from the commission, it appears. I mean, where is the money for the infrastructure for bicycles? I am pleading with you, in the 2nd District, I don't see anything along the rail trail being built. I do see in West Santa Cruz they're building it. I do see in Watsonville they're building it, ironically, adjacent to Beach Street, where it's 25 miles an hour and there's a bike lane already. I don't know the necessary reason for it there. We need it in the 2nd District along Beach Street, where it's 40 miles an hour and you have no bike lane. We need improvements, and this board is not doing it, and I'm pleading with you, please make some safety improvements for bicycling. That's the only way we're going to get people out of their cars and bicycling, and items 1 and 2 are great. I like Bike to Work Day. I do it every time. I like open streets, but those are feel-good social events. It's not infrastructure. Please build some infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else like to address us during this public hearing? Good morning, Mr. Elrick.
Good morning, Commissioners, and good morning, Chair Friend. My name's Paul Elrick. I live in Aptos. I'm here just to echo what one of your commissioners, Mr. McPherson, did, thanking the people who supported Measure D. You know, those of us that supported Measure D, we looked for improvements on bicycles, buses, and roads, and train. we had some foresight that said at some point in time, the rails could, present a solution to the North County, South County lack of transportation. So just a shout out to the people that supported Measure D. Way to go. I'm a little concerned with, now that we've got Measure D, it never would have passed without a train component in there, but we've got it. So, I'm a little concerned that people are mounting a campaign to basically take it out and run another campaign with no trains, and that bothers me. I admire people that ride their bikes, but to be honest with you, I don't see bicycle riders going to work from Watsonville to Santa Cruz and points north riding a bike or walking, especially when it comes time to go home. They're going to be pooped. They're not going to, not everybody is bicycle capable. So, give some thought to the people who have some foresight and see a possible solution in the future of fixed rail trains. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elrick. Is there anybody else like to address us on the RTIP funding allocations? On the RTIP public hearing? Please. Is there anybody else after this speaker, just so I have a sense? Great.
Hi, I'm Ryan Sarnataro from Live Oak, and hope I'm talking in the right place. But in terms of you're obtaining the rail corridor, when you first did that, you made a promise that there would be a train on it. And that promise was made before the cement plant closed, before the High Line in New York.
I'm going to briefly interrupt you. I understand the process is a little bit confusing. This is specific to the funding items that are outlined in pages, say, 23-14 or so through 23-20.
I'll come back.
Yeah, please do, please do. I'm sorry, it's a confusing situation. Good morning, Mr. Schneider, welcome.
Thank you. Chair, Commissioners, Chris Schneider, Assistant Director of Public Works, City of Santa Cruz. I want to thank the Commission, support the staff recommendation to fund the projects that are listed. 3 of the 4 of the city's highest priority projects are partially funded. We understand they can't be fully funded. The first one is a state highway project, 1 and 9, to help fund construction. The city is investing a significant amount of its own local funding to design and acquire right-of-way for the project, which is in the, currently happening. Paving, street preservation of River Street, which connects up to 1 and 9. A sidewalk and bike lane project in the beach area, one of the missing pieces that's been missing for a long time, which is going to keep people, make it a safer facility. And then the 4th project, which isn't funded, which is the roundabout at Bay and High in front of the university. And we're working cooperatively with the university to come up with some other ways to fund it in the future. That'll be something that'll be coming up in the next year or 2. I really want to thank Rachel for her years of service and her wizardry and figuring out how we're going to fund the maximum amount of transportation projects to the best way possible. And I want to welcome her to the half your lifetime in a public agency club. It's an important place. She's contributing a lot to the community, as a lot of other people have. And I'm not going to blame her for Brian participating in the transportation process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Retker. I'd just like to speak about funding for the Metro. And I think we really, as far as trying to bring down our pollution, that would be one of the best solutions next to having safe bike lanes. But I think we really need to put a big emphasis on making riding the bus sexy again, in that having dedicated lanes for the buses and syncing them up with the lights so they can just keep on going and they're not sitting in traffic. I mean, really, when you look at Highway 1 in the morning and you just see that whole line of cars there, if a full bus was in there and you would allocate each person that bus the same amount of space for a single rider in a car, that would, you would see that it would justify that they have their own dedicated lane. And also with other, like if other businesses had their own buses, they too could zoom along and just make it more appealing when people would get out of their cars and get on the bus. And just using more data to determine where the need is right now. Most people don't want to ride a bus, but if it were like vans that went out farther where it would be easier for people to access the public transportation, it would work in conjunction with safe biking lanes that are all connected. If you build it, they will come. So if you make the metro more appealing, then people will ride it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else during this public hearing specifically for the RTIP? Thank you. All right, then we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for action and discussion. Are there questions? Commissioner Schifrin.
I have a question for staff about the worst-case scenario total. Is there anything magical about that 9,700,000 number? I'm particularly thinking about what would be the catastrophe if the commission added $30,000 under the worst-case scenario for the bike-to-work day.
So the worst-case scenario uses just the $4.7 million that the CTC is mandated to provide us, the local partnership program funds, and what's available from the Surface Transportation Block Grant funds. So it's those, and then the state transit assistance funding. So it's those funding sources that we know are not going to go away. But as far as a disaster of adding more, you know, it would result in us dipping into future years' STBG funds, essentially, if that worst-case scenario were to play out.
But the CTC is able to kind of mix and match any way they want, right? They could decide, we could recommend $950,000 for the Ziente project, and they could say, oh, well, we think that's too much, we'll give it $900,000.
Well, they would give it zero. They won't give it partial. They'll either fund a project or they won't fund it, so yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, and thank you for this very thorough report and understandable report. It's very helpful for commissioners. I just wanted to see if we could get some clarification about the bike racks at the Aptos Village, on the Aptos Village project. My understanding is that those were supposed to be put in, and I'm hearing now maybe not, so if we could get some clarification there.
Sure. The County of Santa Cruz has confirmed that the project does include Class 2 bicycle lanes. That was one of the questions that had come up at the Bicycle Committee. The development does include bicycle racks within the development, although they're not, I think, publicly funded. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think the Village Development Project does have its own set of bike racks within the Village Development itself, and we do have full bike lanes throughout the 3 phases that we have on Soquel Drive, the public portion of Soquel Drive, and we're still looking at what the amenities are. We have 3 phases of that project. We're in about 30% design phase on the Aptos Creek Road signalization project. And we still haven't gotten to the point of what all the different amenities are and what they will be. Those are kind of like sort of icing on the cake details. But we're considering it. We understand that the Bicycle Committee is interested in it, and users of that area are interested in that as well. So we'll squeeze them in if we can.
If we can.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at item, excuse me, it's been mentioned before, item 1, open streets events. It mentions that these are events for Santa Cruz, Watsonville. Capitola has been served by this. I guess I'm looking for something for San Lorenzo Valley and Scotts Valley. It's like, where's the love there? We have taxpayers. We have kids in need. We have businesses that are pretty extensive, and yet there's no allowance for those people who pay their fair share of taxes. Just wondering why that is.
Is Bike Santa Cruz County still here? You know,
and there hasn't been one probably in 5 years.
Sure.
And certainly even with Ecology Action, you know, Bike to School Day and so forth has totally ignored Scotts Valley and San Lorenzo Valley. So just want to know why.
Just generally speaking about any projects, and there's been some projects identified today during the public hearing and by commissioners that aren't on this list. The process for identifying projects always begins with conversations with the project sponsors and putting forward applications. And I'm sure Jannika's about to tell you that she'd be happy to partner with the city of Scotts Valley and other folks up in San Lorenzo Valley
But this is
to do programs.
This is an ongoing trend, okay, of being ignored.
I'll hand that one over to you.
Thank you. We would love to have an open streets event in Scotts Valley. And, you know, the application that we submitted this year, Bike Santa Cruz County has only been organizing open streets for the last 2 years, and we're really looking to stabilize these events, and that's why we're seeking funding from the Regional Transportation Commission. And so, you know, that's why we didn't throw in an additional location, but our goal as an organization is to grow the events in more locations around the county, and I'd love to talk to you more about how we can make that happen.
Well, thank you, because I think I'm probably the only commissioner aside from Andy who rides their bike 3 or 4 times to work, so.
Can I address the commission on Commissioner Johnson's comment about Ecology Action? So just Ecology Action is in City of Scotts Valley in terms of our twice-a-year Bike to Work Day and our twice-a-year Bike and Walk to School days. We also in the city schools of Scotts Valley for bike safety programs for 5th graders. And then we also just applied for a statewide Caltrans grant with the County of Santa Cruz and the Health Services. And Scotts Valley is included in that grant. That grant will bring in a study to see what can be done to improve safe routes to school for the Scotts Valley schools. So just those are some touch points where Ecology Action is involved with the city of Scotts Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, I just had one more question so on item 7, this is Cruise 511. So it's a substantial amount of money. It's $300,000, and I was heartened by the gentleman from Watsonville in place of Lowell Hurst. Forgive me, I forgot his name. I know he works for the city there. That actually uses 511. I would, you know, maybe this is a great program. I've always thought, and I know I periodically ask people, do you use 511? I usually get a no because they have their phones. Google has a nice map. Is there any way that we can judge and see if and grade the outcome of an expenditure like this to see who uses 511 to make sure it's a investment for the RTC?
Absolutely, and we have a new project manager for the program, and a major focus of the program moving forward is looking at those kind of performance-based improvements and making sure that the dollars are spent on the programs that really do benefit the community the most. You'll be receiving a presentation, I think, at your next board meeting on the Cruise 511 in your neighborhood program, which looked very closely at how that performed, and that information will be provided to you in January.
So we're going to know participation and outcome.
Absolutely, yes.
And what if it fails miserably? Are we going to retract these funds?
The commission can always it's a commission-run program, and the commission can provide direction on where you want those funds spent and work with staff on that, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bertrand.
So I don't know all the intricacies of public disclosure, but there was a statement from someone in the public that they had tried to get access to some of the plans in the Aptos Village, and they weren't actually given that. Now, is that because, as stated a little bit earlier, that some of these are in progress? There's the different stages, so I just want to understand if that's connected.
Yes, generally when any project is in the draft phases, those aren't subject to public records requests until the design is more thoroughly vetted.
Okay, so it wasn't that they were being denied, it just wasn't finalized.
I can't speak specifically to that project, but that's generally that, you know, when things are in motion, that you typically don't release that information until it is available. You know, for the environmental document on the Highway 1 project, for instance, there's just certain information we can't release until the document is ready for public review.
Okay, I think that's very reasonable. So in terms of Project 3, it's Metro's request for refurbishing buses, and they requested 3.6, and 900 was given. So I think that's a great project to be fully funded because it's a look forward. It'll extend the lives of buses. Does the RTC have plans to work with Metro to further that program?
Metro is seeking grants from a variety of different programs through the Federal Transit Administration. They have a game plan for their, well, they're working on, they have 60 buses that they need to, that are beyond their age. And so this isn't asking for 60 buses to be replaced either. And so I think that Metro staff is going out to look under all the rocks out there and pull money in where they can. They have supported the staff recommendation at the ITAC meeting.
Okay, great. So I think as someone in the public mentioned that we sort of are up against the limits of infrastructure and what we can actually do in Santa Cruz. So that's why I suggested that in terms of the criteria, we start more of an emphasis on look forward in terms of technology. Because I believe, and this is my belief, that technology is going to enable us to actually do more with what we actually have here. And we don't know what it's going to be. Thank you.
Commissioner Leopold.
I want to thank Rachel for her ongoing work. Really appreciate it. I think that this is generally a well-balanced set of recommendations. I appreciate that they that our two committees, the Bicycle Committee, or the three committees, ITAC, the Bicycle Committee, and the E&D TAC Committee reviewed these, and the final recommendations are very close to what it is they proposed. And so I'd like to move forward the recommendations in this staff report with one change, is to increase our worst-case scenario by $30,000 so we can put that money into the Everyday is Bike to Work Day.
Second.
A motion from...
And I have a friendly amendment to that.
Let me just finish the motion. A motion from Commissioner Leopold, second from Commissioner Schifrin. Commissioner Lind.
Yes, and just on the staff recommendation, just a minor tweak in wording that Metro would receive a minimum of 16% of the county's actual LPP funds, fund allocation for the 2-year funding cycle, just in case there's some changing on some of the funds that are there. Just
Commissioner Leopold, it's been presented as a friendly amendment.
I think this is a larger policy discussion that I think we should have separate from this particular funding recommendation.
It's not deemed a friendly amendment.
It a friendly amendment.
You could. That could be proposed as a counter motion.
Could I ask for clarification of, I didn't really understand the amendment request and how it relates to this item?
Commissioner Bator, if you were a part of this discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in on this. And Rachel, while I appreciate that you mentioned that it was cumbersome to try to divide things up, I think when it comes to the LPP funds, just to give everybody an overview, we became a self-help county, which means we were eligible for all of us, cities, counties, and agencies, to receive some additional funding. And I had some conversations with the director and assistant director, and it's a complicated system, as Rachel said, to disperse this money. But, you know, because as representative City of Capitola, I'm concerned about how we would get our portion of this money if we want to do a project. And because it's complicated, as you mentioned, I was willing to say that the Metro staff recommended that we let this go for 2 years, as they're in a 2-year cycle. With that being said, Metro is doing a 2-year budget, and I think what we've all heard today is, and I think what we all believe is, main component of transportation in our county right now is the Metro bus system. So they have a 16% share of the Measure D funds, and so we're just trying to say if we're going to get this self-help money, this LPP funds, we want to reinforce that with 16% and give them a 2-year guarantee, not to complicate every other city or every other county or agency, but just specifically for Metro. So I support Commissioner Lind's friendly amendment to just guarantee a 16% share for the next 2 years. And I want to support the staff by saying they want to see how this money comes, how we distribute it, and evaluate it. At the end of that 2-year cycle, make some possible changes.
I have a point of order.
Please.
It seems to me that this is it would be a violation of the Brown Act to approve this. This is not on the agenda as something to be considered. Some of what's being requested here, it seems to me, has to do with item number 22, which in some ways should have been combined with this, because that has to do with the STA funding and a 2-year allocation to the Metro Board for that additional that additional funding for their buses. So I originally was going to ask that these two items be combined, since there's STA money here and there's STA money there. But I think it makes more sense to talk about longer-term funding with the for Metro, particularly with this new STA funding that's being recommended for them under that item, than to try to. It just doesn't seem to me that talking about giving guarantees for TDA funding or Measure D funding when we have an item which is the RTIP is what is really allowable under the Brown Act, because it was not publicly noticed. And so I don't think anybody's had a chance, the public hasn't had a chance to talk about it, and we haven't had a staff report to really look at what the implications of it are.
Thank you, Commissioner Schifrin. Just as a reminder, we have a motion and a second. We had a friendly amendment that was not deemed a friendly amendment, so we're still, I appreciate that information, but that was not presented as a follow-up motion, and we're still discussing the recommended actions with one minor modification. Commissioner McPherson.
Yeah, I think on this LPP, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I think that should be discussed in item 23, if at all.
Point 2.
23.
Yeah,
Point 2.
Before this one.
Yeah, before this.
Commissioner Bottorff.
I just want to clarify, I believe that the LPP funds are actually under item 23. And when I measured Measure D, I was just mentioning the percentage number, not that I'm relating that to Measure D. It was just that Measure D actually had a 16%, and that was the ask of the LPP funds, which is under item 23. And that's all I'm speaking about right now is LPP funds.
And that was it's actually included. This is not a violation. It's described in the staff recommendation. And it actually, in the staff recommendation, it said includes at least 16% of LPP funds to Santa Cruz Metro for its proposed capital project. So it's just a clarification of the words in the staff recommendation.
So in terms of the allocation, I'm just really trying to understand what is being recommended to be amended here. There's $975,590 under 5A, which I guess is what you're talking about. What would be different than what is being recommended here in your amendment?
It's just a slight amount of the only wording, because the wording in the staff recommendation includes at least 16% of LPP funds, and just asking that be the actual local partnership, because some of these funds are in some question. We don't know what's happening with some of the funds.
Can I just provide clarification? So item 5, which is the Metro revenue vehicle replacements for $1,025,000, we have worked with Metro staff, and they do intend to use some of the LPP funds, the RTC's share of the LPP funds on that. We are working with them to see if they can use $150,000 of the LPP funds on that project, and then the balance would be covered by the State Transportation Improvement Program. So while the Commission could say that you want to ensure that we're putting some LPP funds on that project, that's fine. That is actually what we are already doing. So I don't know that a motion is actually needed for that. We do recommend against setting a policy to say that LPP funds will be split on the same proportion as Measure D funds. In that scenario, the City of Capitola, for instance, would receive $3,000. We would instantly spend about $10,000 just filling out the paperwork that's associated with the LPP funds. So it's just not the most efficient use of funds to split these, the LPP funds based on Measure D formulas. And also there are many projects that are in Measure D that were not proposed. And so then do we then hold back some of the money for those other categories become a question as well. So from an efficiency standpoint, we highly recommend against setting formulas.
Mr. Clifford, if you briefly address this, and again, this was not deemed a friendly amendment, so we have a motion on the floor.
Sure, just to add a little bit of hopefully helpful information. Our board took an action at its last board meeting asking me to communicate to the Commission that we request 16% of the LPP be allocated to Santa Cruz Metro. That was a unanimous vote of our board. In this board report that you have, you're not being asked to approve funding sources. You're being asked to approve projects. But if you, in that board report, it alludes to the fact that for STIP projects, transit may not be funded. There's a possibility that transit will not be funded in the STIP. You have transit projects identified there for us to be funded. One of those is an electric bus. And staff, RTC staff has proposed that about $547,000 of LPP be matched by $547,000 of STIP in order to fund that bus. And that's great, and that's more than 16% of the LPP. That's wonderful. But in the event that the STIP does not fund transit projects, we're just looking for a safety net that says you're still going to get 16%, or what is estimated to be $103,000 for that 2-year cycle, so that we can program that. My last editorial, we have 62 buses to replace. We need all the help we can get.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. There was an amendment proposed that was denied, with a motion with a slight modification from Commissioner Leopold. All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed?
No.
And a no.
2 opposed. So it passes. We'll move on to back to item 21, which is the Caltrans.
I want to make it clear here. Who voted no on this?
Commissioner Lynn, Commissioner Botdorf,
I'm going to add my name.
and Commissioner Caput. So we're going to move on to item 21, which is going back in time here to the Caltrans report and consider action items. We have the district director's report and the Santa Cruz County project updates. Good morning, Ms. Lowe. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I would just like to remind you, first off, that the 2018 California State Rail Plan is still open for comment. I know that you had a presentation last month by our staff from the Division of Rail. This plan was released in mid-October, and the comment period closes this coming Monday, December 11th. And as you know now, the rail plan aims to produce an integrated system, state-of-the-art for California, that will really revolutionize personal mobility and enhance quality of life. I hope, if you haven't yet, I hope that you will take the time to look over the plan and give us your comments. I'd also like to congratulate the City of Watsonville and Santa Cruz County for successfully competing in the Sustainability Communities Grant application. The California Transportation Commission just announced and approved a long list of planning proposals that were successful with the new funding afforded through Senate Bill 1. So congratulations to you on the work that you will be able to do now for complete streets with safe routes to schools. The project information is up to date in your packet there. I'm here to answer questions, and I recognize there were a few outstanding questions from last month that we still owe you responses to. We're working on those.
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Are there questions of Caltrans? And it says consider report and action items, but there are no action items. It's an oral report only. So are there any questions of Ms. Lowe? Commissioner Caput.
You bet. I want to thank you for your cooperation in answering questions from District 4 and everything like that. And I think we're going to talk about one of the items that we brought up on Main Street and Watsonville. But anyway, I'm just curious, how many districts are there for Caltrans in the state of California?
There are 12.
12. We have 58 counties, and we only have 12 Caltrans districts. So for you to be responding back to our questions, I really appreciate that, because you've got a lot of area to cover.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Are there any other questions of Caltrans? Mr. Dondero, do you have a point?
On item 22.
Okay, we're on item 21 still. So.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Caltrans? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 22, which is the State Transit Assistant STA allocations. We have a staff report. Mr. Dondero, are you going to give the staff report?
Well, no, I'd like to request that we have item 22 follow item 24, because our consulting team is here for item 24, and they have to leave by noon, and there's some concern.
I see.
They're going to run out of time. So,
I see.
If that's possible.
Okay, I see. Did you have a comment on
public
item 22?
comment allowed for the Cal?
Yeah, that's fine. We'll give 3 minutes for public comments, a non-action item, but Ms.
Thank you very much.
Steinbrenner,
I'll be
please.
brief. Becky Steinbruner, resident of Aptos Hills. Thank you for that report. I have viewed the 2018 California Rail Plan and found it interesting that it includes passenger rail service from Santa Cruz to Monterey with connector points to the Amtrak Caltrain corridor at both Pajaro and Castroville. So to that end, I would really like to see this board support infrastructure to that end and make those connections possible. Funding of the Pajaro station was pulled out of the Measure D plan, and that's a travesty, given especially the Caltrain plan. And I also want to ask if there, make sure that there are plans coming along for the State Park Drive intersection. There's a very serious traffic hazard there with the intersection coming off of Sea Ridge, and I hope that Caltrans will address that, as Supervisor Friend has said is imperative for any safety improvements in that intersection. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there aren't any objections from the commission, we will move item 22 past item 24. Are there any concerns with commissioners on that? Seeing none, we will now move to item 24, which is the Unified Corridor Investment Study, the UCS, the draft Step 1 analysis. We have a staff report, the project level analysis, the scenario analysis, the Step 2 scenarios for analysis, including the staff recommendations, the project area map, the goals, criteria, and performance measures, the Step 1 scenarios evaluated in the advisory committee, stakeholder, and public input opportunities. Good morning, Ms. Dykar and Ms. Blakesley. Are you both presenting? Oh, good morning.
Good morning. I am Ginger Dykar, Transportation Planner of your staff, and my item on the agenda today is to discuss the Unified Corridor Investment Study. The staff recommendations are to review and approve the draft Step 1 analysis, which is in attachments 1 and 2 of the packet, and review and approve staff recommendations for projects and scenarios to analyze in the Step 2 scenario analysis. Also to approve $25,000 from the rail allocation portion of Measure D to be added to the Unified Corridor Investment Study project budget to hold 2 sets of focus group meetings with community organizations during Step 2 of the analysis and amend the Measure D 5-year plan for the rail corridor and the RTC budget accordingly. The Unified Corridor Study will identify transportation investments on 3 parallel transportation routes in Santa Cruz County, as shown here on the map: Highway 1, SoCal and Freedom, and the Santa Cruz Branch Rail Line. There is much debate in our community on how best to address the transportation challenges that face residents and visitors of Santa Cruz County. The congestion on Highway 1 with spillover into our neighborhoods, the need for equitable transportation options, and the safety of our bicyclists and pedestrians, as well as the transportation impacts on climate change, have us all wanting solutions now and for the future. The need for a rigorous analysis in order to make an informed decision is clear. The steps of the Unified Corridor Study are illustrated in this slide. The project started by defining the goals of the study and the criteria and performance measures that can be used to evaluate how the goals are being advanced. The list of projects was then developed, and then these projects were grouped together in scenarios for evaluation. These can be found on attachment 6 of the packet. And as a side note, staff made adjustments to how the trail projects were listed in the project list, as we realized it was inaccurate and premature how the trail projects were delineated. Additional information has been collected through field investigations, and the trail description for each of the trail options on the rail right-of-way will be discussed at the end of this presentation and is also provided in the packet materials as we move, and we will be looking for your input and approval for these as we move into the Step 2 analysis. A 2-step scenario analysis is being performed. First step is to assess the feasibility of the projects. It is here in the Step 1 analysis that is being brought to you today for your review and approval. The second step of the scenario analysis is to evaluate a smaller set of projects and scenarios in more detail. A project report and preferred scenarios is scheduled to be brought to the Transportation Commission in December 2018. The benefits of a scenario analysis is already being realized as evidenced through the dialogue in our community that is brought in to discuss the whole transportation system as a whole rather than one route and one mode. In the Step 1 analysis, the project team performed a project-level analysis, which is included in Attachment 1 of the staff report, and a scenario-level analysis, which is included in Attachment 2. The project-level analysis discusses the potential for each of the projects to address the transportation challenges in our community using a triple bottom line approach. Then the analysis assessed whether the project is feasible from a number of different perspectives. Is there community support for this project? Is it compatible with regulatory requirements? Are there constructability constraints? Is there available right-of-way? What is the cost of the project and the likelihood that there will be funding available? This analysis brought together in one place relevant information about opportunities and constraints for each project. Project descriptions were also provided in these packets. Some projects have already been through a planning process, which has been used to describe these projects, whereas other projects have not undergone a planning process, and project descriptions have been defined here for the first time. At this time, I'd like to introduce Frederick Venter from Kinley Horn. He's the project manager for the consultant team. Frederick has many years of experience working in Santa Cruz County on transportation planning and engineering, and he will provide information on the projects and scenarios recommended to be evaluated in the Step 2 of the analysis.
Thank you, Ginger. Good morning, Commissioners. So we started out with an information process and provided numerous opportunities for the community to provide input and give feedback to us. This was done through public workshops, both in Watsonville and Santa Cruz, meeting with community organizations, email correspondence. There was an online survey, and also meeting with focus groups based on certain requests that we've had, also RTC advisory committees. So in the packet, and the links that were provided in the packet, there's a full set of all the comments that were received. Based on the inputs, which was really good information towards us as a team, we have made some recommendations on the next steps that we want to take to the Step 2 analysis. And this slide shows you the scenarios that we have changed and also recommend to take forward into the Step 2 analysis for each of the corridors. So the scenario A focuses on basically all the modes. We've added to scenario A the intersection improvements for bikes and peds. We also recommend scenario B as it was defined in the Step 1 process. For scenario C, we recommend to add the bus on shoulder project and also include the intersection improvements for the bikes and peds. And then we recommend not to do scenario D. And scenario E, we recommend as it was proposed, and scenario F, we recommend not to do, and then there will be a no-build scenario analyzed in Step 2 as well. All scenarios will have a ped and bike trail option as shown under the rail corridor scenario. So this graphically depicts a little bit more detail on the scenarios. The table is pretty complex. We didn't see through the public participation process that people really needed to dive into the information to understand what we're trying to do. So Highway 1 projects are listed at the top, SoCal and Freedom in the middle, and the rail right-of-way. You will see that the Bus rapid transit, where we went for the option of providing an exclusive lane on SoCal and Freedom, was voted out, so it's not in any of the options. So all options will have the bus rapid light, which provide priority to the bus rapid transit at intersections. Scenario B, again there, Highway 1, specific projects that we've identified and included there, bus on shoulder and metering. The intersection improvements would by default also include bicycle and pedestrian improvements, so it's not just purely a capacity improvement for vehicles. And then of course when we also look at the bus rapid transit light, those improvements would also be extended to at the intersection analysis. Scenario C pictures also shows you the various projects that are included in a picture format. Scenario C also includes a freight service in Watsonville, so that would extend from Lee Road all the way through to Pajaro to maintain that connection through the industrial areas. And then scenario E shows a full freight service because we maintain the rail service. We were asked to provide a little bit more detail on the trail options that we have for the rail corridor scenario, so I'm going to walk you through a few slides. The first option here was a trail-only option, and those would provide bike and walk opportunities only on the rail corridor, no transit. 16 to 26 feet wide trail with separation between cyclists and pedestrians in the urban areas. Oh, sorry about that. Got to read there. And there would be a continuous trail within the rail right-of-way. We believe that paving of the existing tracks or paving over the existing tracks in place would not be feasible. And there are various reasons for those, specifically the ballast that cannot be just paved over, and if the rail and the ties need to be removed. And then there's some unknowns in terms of this project. It needs to be planned, it needs to be funded, so how this would happen, some unknowns in that regard. The next option would be a trail and bus rapid transit option. So we would have bus, bike, and walk options for it. The bus would run from Watsonville to Santa Cruz up to Schaefer Road, but it would enter the rail corridor at State Park Drive. So it would basically use the freeway, and then once it gets to State Park, enter the rail corridor. There would be bidirectional and one-way directional due to constraints in right-of-way, where the bus would be able, so one direction of the bus could go on a city street network that parallels the rail corridor. The same year, paving over the existing tracks in place is not feasible. And the freight rail service would also be Lee Road to Watsonville. Continuing on the rapid transit option, the cross-section would be about 12 to 15 feet wide, a multi-use trail, and 16 feet wide if we could fit in a separated trail in some sections. The trail alignment through Capitola would follow the city streets because of the trestle. And again, this is not a project that has been planned, so unknowns in terms of funding required and getting it through a process and assigning the right-of-way and BRT. So this gets us back to the table that shows the recommended options, and I think that's where we end our discussion. Thank you.
Are there questions of, as I imagine there are, of commissioners of the consultant or RTC staff before we open up to the public? Commissioner Schifrin, please.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for this staff report. I'm a little confused about the attachment 3 recommended step 2 scenarios. You can help me understand what's really being recommended here. I know that one of the major concerns is that we really look at a trail-only option versus a rail trail option. But it seems like scenario E combines them, and there really isn't a way of looking at both of those. Make this clearer to me.
Sure, I can step through this. Maybe, okay, it's up on the projector as well. So the scenario A, as far as the rail corridor right-of-way, that would be a trail-only option.
Scenario A?
Scenario A, that cell is filled in next to the bike and pedestrian trail, and the cell is not filled in for the rail or bus rapid transit or freight. So the project that would be included in scenario A for the rail corridor is the bike and pedestrian trail.
Okay, and
So
then
that would be the trail only.
all of the automobile improvements and dedicated bus lanes, et cetera, would be part of that. Okay.
On Soquel and Freedom.
Right.
And then the scenario B is the trail and rail. So that scenario would be looking at having a trail next to the rail.
Okay.
Scenario C would be looking at a trail with a bus rapid transit system with just limited freight service within Watsonville from Lee Road to Pajaro. So the projects are listed on the left, and then if that cell is filled in, that means that project will be considered in that scenario.
So let me ask this. In scenario B, which is the rail I guess, the rail trail scenario, why aren't the auxiliary lanes included in that, since they're going to be built no matter what, it seems to me?
So any project that already has funding will be included in all scenarios. The auxiliary lane projects that are listed here would be projects in addition to the ones funded by Measure D. So Measure D funds the 3 sets of auxiliary lanes from SoCal to 41st and Bay Porter to Park and Park to State Park. But there's an additional, I believe it's 3 more sets that go from State Park to San Andreas Road that would be considered here in this analysis.
So I guess I'm concerned because I think it should be kind of an apples and apples comparison. So I think it's very important to have that comparison, but I am a little concerned that the scenario B does not include the same automobile improvements as scenario A includes, and I wonder what the rationale for that is.
The scenario E does include...
I mean, A and B. I'm saying B does not include the same automobile and bus options that A includes.
So if you're wanting to have the HOV lanes be also in a scenario that it considers rail transit and trail, then that would be scenario E. The scenario E includes the high occupancy vehicle lanes, the additional auxiliary lanes that would get us all the way to San Andreas Road, as well as median on-ramps. And then for the rail corridor, it would be looking at the trail, rail, and freight service.
Okay.
So that may be more comparable to the scenario A that you'd like to see that comparison.
Okay. I have another question about what, this is all, what we've got is all kind of process and potential projects, but there's not really much substance. So I guess I have a question for you about what's going to result out of all of this. Are we going to end up with an analysis for the potential of rail service on the rail line to reduce congestion on Highway 1? Is that going to be part of what comes out of this, as well as the ability of the trail only to reduce congestion on Highway 1?
So this is a 2-step analysis. The first step was looking at, are these projects feasible? And let's move forward with a smaller set of projects based on feasibility. Do they have the potential to address our transportation challenges first? And then are they feasible? And the second step will be looking at the set of performance measures that are, I believe, are attachment 5 of the packet. And those performance measures, yes, it's attachment 5, page 24-79, excuse me. And those performance measures are what we have brought to you back in May, I believe, for approval. So these are the measures that we will be looking at for the various different scenarios. And to address congestion on Highway 1, we would be looking at travel time differences between the different scenarios and what that would mean for our county.
And in looking at cost, what is, I'm sorry, in looking at feasibility, what are the components of feasibility that you're going to be looking at?
So that was part of the step 1 analysis.
So are you saying that all of these scenarios now are potentially feasible?
The ones that we're recommending to move forward into step 2, we have,
So now
we
we're
recommend
moving
that these
into
are
the
feasible.
detailed analysis based on these performance measures.
That's correct.
And that's what we're going to be getting at the, according to your timeline, in the fall of 2018, we're going to be getting a report that's going to analyze the performance differences between these 4 scenarios.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Commissioner Bertrand.
Yeah, I just want to understand a little bit more about the bus rapid transit. So it was mentioned in the slide that it would go off the trestle in Capitola, and no other trestles were mentioned. Does that mean they're going to be on the freeway for other trestles, like going into Santa Cruz? I'm just trying to understand that scenario.
So for the bus rapid transit, we've worked very closely with planners at Metro, both Barrow and Pete, Barrow Emerson and Pete Rasmussen, to try to figure out how to utilize the rail right-of-way for a bus rapid transit combined with the trail. The bus rapid transit would go over the Capitola Trestle. It would be the trail that would go around the Capitola Trestle.
Okay, I got that wrong. Okay, got it. Okay. So it's going to entail significant improvements.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Significant improvements to the trestle there. No comment.
Yeah.
Are there any other commissioners with questions before we open it up? I know there's a lot of members of the community that have interest in this. Seeing none, we'll now open it up to the community for an opportunity to address us on this item. We'll try and keep the comments specific to the scenarios that are presented and the recommendations. How many people would like to address this, just so I can get a sense on time? How many we're going to, okay. We're going to need to limit the speakers to 2 minutes, just based on the number. So it'll be 2 minutes each. Well, it's for you, Randy. It's just too hard to do it down there.
Can advance the slides here, is that right? Okay.
Could I ask a procedural question before we begin? Given the number of speakers and the time, what is the intention of the commission to do when we get to noon? I think some commissioners have to leave at noon. Should we take a break at noon and come back at 1:30 if we don't complete the items? We have a very important item, number 22, that I think needs to be completed today. So I think we should decide what our schedule is going to be, because clearly we're going to be here at least till noon.
Well, I'll take, I'm sorry to the speakers, but I'll take this to learn about everybody's schedule real quick to ensure that we would still maintain a quorum past that time.
I'm for here, but I don't want to take a break. But I will stay here until we finish.
I'm scheduled to be at another meeting.
We only have 2 minutes each.
Okay, so we are going to lose a few commissioners, but I think we'll be able to maintain quorum at that time. So we'll take a, we can take a, would you prefer a break then, Commissioner Schifrin?
I think we should take a lunch break. Even those who stay may get a little affected by the desire for food. So I would suggest that we would break at noon and come back at 1:30.
No, I don't, Chair, I'm not prepared to do that. I'm not going to stay till 1:30 to 3 o'clock. You know, traditionally, this meeting goes from 9 to noon, and it's not, you know, it's not the commissioner's fault that so much was added onto the agenda, when this obviously was going to be a huge, humongous agenda item. So I'm not prepared to come back I can't come back at 1:30, so.
Well, I think what we should probably do, since people are standing in line to speak on this item, we'll have this discussion at that time. So we'll start up, open the public comment. We're going to try and definitely maintain it to 2 minutes. And also, if you hear somebody saying verbatim what you were about to say, just something to think about of whether how necessary it is for you to repeat all the exact same information, and try and keep it specific to item 24.
I think it's important to start.
Good morning and welcome, and we will have that discussion of what to do at that time. Thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Jesus Contreras, and I'm going to talk to you guys about why we should enhance transit along the SoCal and Freedom Corridor. So first of all, why choose SoCal as opposed to the other corridors? SoCal connects major population densities to job densities. We see this because SoCal runs through multiple housing villages. For example, Aptos Village, SoCal Village, Seabright, and downtown Santa Cruz. And not to mention it goes through major population densities in Watsonville. And increasing transit on this corridor will allow people to commute to work a lot more efficiently and get out of their cars, reducing traffic. SoCal is already used intensively by commuters as an everyday commute. As you can see in this map, it illustrates how many drivers or how impacted SoCal is by single vehicle drivers. For just one number, 48,000, and like a segment of 10 blocks, and that can be limited by more efficient bus services. Also, SoCal corridor has been identified to be a street for next development by the City of Santa Cruz Sustainable Development Project. You can see here it's illustrated that there are circles of large housing units and impacted neighborhood activity by the circles. So why SoCal? Because the measurements or the measures will be inexpensive and they won't be so large, and the commuters won't have to accommodate too much, as opposed to redesigning the rail or adding a new auxiliary lane to Highway 1. And ways to enhance this transit is by adding queue-up lanes, signal priority, and additional bus routes.
Thank you. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Enriquez, and I'll be continuing the slide. So one thing we proposed is adding queue jump lanes and making sure that the buses jump ahead of the traffic that's congested. We have a few potential queue jump lanes all along the SoCal corridor, and these are just a few of them. Another way to enhance is using transit signal priority, where we'd have the buses, the stoplights, the green lights longer when the buses are approaching, and have the red lights turn green faster as buses are approaching to lessen the congestion of traffic. And the Metro has a few short-range plans, modifying the 71 and the 91X along Water Street in between Morrissey and downtown Santa Cruz. Another short-range plan that they have is once the buses are south of Aptos, we have the 71 and 69 take each other's place. This would another plan for the Santa Cruz Metro is to introduce a 70 bus route that services from Santa Cruz Metro Station up to Cabrillo, and it loops back around instead of having the bus travel from Santa Cruz Metro to the Watsonville Transit Center. And another thing we want to do is just build a pro-transit constituency. In November, we had about 80% of Cabrillo students vote yes on a bus measure that gives them that they'd only have to pay $40 per semester in order to keep a bus pass. If, let's say, they live here in Santa Cruz, they can benefit from using that bus pass because it would lessen traffic as they won't have to use, a lot of them won't be single riders, and they'd have to take the bus. So far, we've got the UCSC students. I'm a UCSC student, so I know I benefit from having bus passes. I'm definitely sure that Cabrillo students that benefit from this measure too. Our next step is getting downtown Santa Cruz employees this bus pass also as well. Boulder has the same thing. They have an eco pass where they give a bus pass to every downtown employee. And Boulder has a 23% ridership, whereas opposed to Santa Cruz only has a 3% ridership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Longinati.
Good morning, Rick Longinati with the Campaign for Sensible Transportation. So great. Last slide is just, this is what my request to the commissioners is that we have, our organization, supports the transit option on the rail corridor. We think it would be tragic to give up a transit option on a corridor that doesn't have to compete with automobiles. So, we know that that widening Highway 1, according to the draft EIR and experience everywhere else in the world, is a very short-lived congestion relief solution. And so we're really pro-transit for the rail corridor. And we're also talking to the Greenways folks whose slogan is trail only. But in the course of, conversations, I've got to say that I think it's worth talking to them because I don't think that that's a categorical opposition to transit. I don't want to put words in their mouth, so that's all I'm going to say right now. But what the recommendation that before you would be to establish a stakeholder committee where these two groups, as well as business groups and other groups representing the entire county, would gather together in a conflict resolution process along with the staff the RTC and the consultants for the Unified Corridor Study so that we can look into the technical issues of, how wide is the corridor, and would it supply a really nice bikeway as well as some kind of transit? I mean, those are the kind of technical things that we could really use help on to resolve this conflict. Without such a conflict resolution, I foresee just a lot of, ballot measure lawsuits and so on. I think at some point we're going to have to solve this, and why not now, while we have a $700,000 study being done that's going to be over within a year. Why not jump on right now so we can have that consultant interaction? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Longinati. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Michael Spadafora, longtime business owner here in town. I've had a business for 25 years right off the train tracks. I've had about 1,000 employees work for me over the past 25 years. Most of them have not had cars. I'm going to say about 50% of them. A great way to move people up and down this corridor would be a bicycle path and a light rail. Employees at the Seaside Company, employees at the Crow's Nest, employees in Capitola Village, people wanting to go down to Aptos Village. You can travel back and forth. Most of the walking distance is about a mile if you go north. Most of the traffic, if you watch traffic going from Mission Street down towards Watsonville, it's about 2 lanes of traffic of people, single individual cars traveling from west side of Santa Cruz, south down towards Watsonville. So the best use of that corridor is to figure out a way to get both a light rail of sort and a bicycle path. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome back. Thank you for understanding.
Yeah. Thank you. Monique Kramer, Santa Cruz. I'm also a business owner in Santa Cruz. I've lived here for over 40 years, and I wasn't aware that light rail was even what was being discussed. But anyway, I would like to really urge us to stop spending what I think is ill-spent money on studying rail transit. Continuing to do this is not a benign choice. It has felt like for a long time as if this body has focused a little too much energy in that direction. There are multiple shortcomings in the notion of rail transit itself, having to do with true cost, the noise, the actual width of the corridor, safety issues, and most importantly, actual effect on traffic congestion. Continuing to spend limited resources on studying rail transit as a viable choice for our community perpetuates the misguided notion that a commuter rail in Santa Cruz County would have any measurable effect on traffic, the environment, or our quality of life. It also feeds the notion, in the face of much evidence to the contrary, that a commuter rail is some kind of actual solution to Santa Cruz's traffic problems, when we know that the majority of people on Highway 1 are going over to San Jose or over the hill. The truth is that committing Santa Cruz's limited resources to this idea has the potential to do the opposite of what it purports to do. Per the only feasibility study that I've seen, which was involving the train, even at the highest ridership estimates, which would require trains running every 15 minutes. I understand it's theoretical only, but it's all we have to work with at this point. From 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. trains, the effect on Highway 1 traffic looked to be almost undetectable, and the street congestion would increase due to train crossing delays. This rail corridor was never intended to support a commuter train, and consequently goes very few places that anyone needs to go. Directing money toward a fixed rail system that by design will carry very few people, less than 1% of the county's population, according to that same feasibility study, again, less than 1% of the county's population, pulls money away from things we need to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Will Mencheen. I'm a longtime resident of Santa Cruz. And I'm very concerned that there is a lack of a analysis of a project that has not shown up at this point on either the project list or as part of any of the scenarios, which is looking at a full-fledged commitment and analysis of bus rapid transit in the freeway corridor. I understand that there's bus rapid transit light on the Soquel corridor. I understand that one of the scenarios includes bus rapid transit on the rail corridor. But the question I have is, where is the analysis of a seriously, committed involvement with treating the freeway corridor with dedicated lanes as a potential bus rapid transit corridor, and further going into the Tier 1 projects in the future with the freeway? how the changes to the inner exchanges and rebuilding of the overpasses and that sort of thing could be accomplished or could be connected with a higher level of bus rapid transit, bringing buses directly through direct access ramps to Dominican Hospital, Cabrillo College, and some of the other big attractors for employment as well as business. Secondly, my belief is that the rail corridor should be specialized for human power, pedestrian, bicycle type vehicles. But there's an emerging type of vehicle, emerging class of vehicles, which are essentially mobility devices ranging everything from electric skateboards to self-balancing unicycles to Segway type devices, as well as velo type mobiles, so pedal assist vehicles, three-wheel and four-wheel type vehicles, that if there was a commitment to make a truly wide transportation-based path, would extend the use to these potential future vehicles. In the scenario pairing that exists with rail with trail, the idea is that it's a built-in twofer type of a solution. The Greenway approach is actually optimizing the rail corridor for future possibilities and pairing that with bus rapid transit on the highway. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Matt Hyde. I'm a Santa Cruz resident, and I've spent the last 5.5 years commuting between Santa Cruz and Watsonville in my capacity, or my former capacity, as the CEO of West Marine, where I also employed 450 people who did much the same. Most of them lived between Santa Cruz and Watsonville. In that time, I took public transportation, rode my bike several times, and mostly drove my car, which gave me, I think, a practical viewpoint of commuting within Santa Cruz County here. From that, I urge the Commission to fully consider a trail-only option for the rail corridor. And I do this for 3 reasons. One is I don't believe that a train system would be anything but an economic burden for this county, which we don't need given all of the competing needs for funding these days. Second, it'll open up commuting by bicycle, and as the last gentleman spoke about, other modes of transportation to many people for 2 reasons. One, safety. And when you allow for safe commuting by bicycling, you're opening it up to many, many more people. And secondarily, as Mr. Bertrand has brought up many times around technology, e-bicycles are going to revolutionize bicycle commuting, as they already have in Europe over the last few years. We are behind, and the United States is catching up very quickly. And then finally, I would say that this is an opportunity for the Commission to provide an affordable community resource that will be invaluable for the future. Before I came to Santa Cruz, I lived in Seattle, Washington for 26 years, worked for REI, which gives me quite a perspective on bicycle commuting and from a global perspective. And in Seattle, they have the Burke-Gilman Trail, where it was a very controversial thing to change that railway to a 27-mile trail that thousands of people commute on every single day now. And I will tell you that city would be a lesser city without it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. And welcome.
Hello, my name is Gina Kulfer. I'm a lifelong resident of Aptos, and I walk the tracks every day to Wing Spread. And in that small area, it is so narrow. To widen that, to be able to have a train plus a trail, you would have to remove all of the live oaks that are along that corridor and also encroach into the neighbors' yards, because that is a very narrow corridor. So I don't know if you have walked that corridor. It's a beautiful area. Another thing that I have noticed is the trestles between Rio Del Mar and Park Avenue, State Park Drive, are very narrow. And for that area, that squeezes down the traffic, and really that's like a definite congestion zone, because people naturally slow down there because there's not a lot of room in between the end of the road, or the white line, and it squeezes down. People naturally slow down there. If the train is to go forward, those trestles would stay in place. So that area would never able to be widened. If you put a pedestrian trail over, it would be probably less expensive because the infrastructure or the strength of the trail wouldn't have to be as such as if you were putting a train there. So possibly being able to widen that area, because that is definitely a squeeze zone and people naturally slow down there. Obviously, I'm a proponent of the trail-only plan, and I've never been to these chambers before, and I am passionate about this being a trail-only.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. Welcome back.
Good morning, Commissioners. Michael Saint with Sensible Transportation. I'd like to get right to it and bring us back to the Unified Corridor Study. This is a summary on item 24, page 5, the top paragraph. It's input that's being expressed through various avenues of your participation with the public, and it basically reduces the amount of time cars and commercial vehicles spend in congestion, and to me, ox lanes would do just the opposite of that. It says the public would like to make biking and walking safer and more efficient for children and adults. I agree. Also, the public would like to reduce the impacts of transportation on climate change. Ox lanes would not do that. Planning for future technologies would also help the present infrastructure improve. Investing in transit was also a public interest. Ox lanes not helping that either. Offering feasible and equitable evidence for transportation for Santa Cruz County residents without them having to drive or own a vehicle. Also, ox lanes will not support that. I had my colleague's son read this and asked of his impression without any input from me, and he says it looks like the public wants mass transit and buses, just by reading, which is your summary on this UCS analysis 1. Down at the bottom, it says bus on shoulders would shift drivers to transit, but may not be feasible. I like Rick's suggestion about the stakeholders committee. We can all get together. A campaign for sensible transportation is ready to help on this, and let's try to make that a feasible option. How much time? 16 seconds? Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Koenig.
Good morning, Commissioners. Manu Koenig from District 2. I spend the better part of my waking hours collecting signatures for Greenway. I'm happy to report that we now have over 5,000 signatures in support of this. I'm sure that we'll spend more time at a future meeting discussing exactly how these signatures are being collected and what's being communicated to the public. I don't want to talk about bikes or trains, though, right now. I want to talk about an arterial corridor. I want to talk about essentially a second highway in our county. I was walking the rail corridor the other day just by Simpkins Swim Center. Don't worry, I was with an Army nurse, so I was perfectly safe. And this nurse has 2 children, so we had a stroller with us. And as we were crossing from Simpkins over to the other side, you know, we stopped traffic, both directions. And once they'd stopped, we proceeded. And after about 30 seconds to a minute of waiting, the cars were able to cross behind us. Now, it does not take a genius to realize that if this happens 100 to thousands of times a day, it is going to cause significant impact on our surface streets. Significant impact. And what we need to be talking about is not these vehicle types, this chart of the different vehicle types. This is like saying, oh, do we prefer Blackberries or flip phones or the Palm Pilot? As Commissioner Bertrand said, technology is rapidly developing. We cannot even anticipate exactly what vehicles we're talking about. But we can, and it's not the job of this commission to invest in vehicles, in my humble opinion. It is the job of this commission to build infrastructure. Arterial roads. We need to be talking about the bridges over 17, Seabright, 41st, 30th, so that we are not interfering with surface traffic, so that we have a continuous route through the county. That's the glaring deficiency in this report, and I beg you to correct it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Brett Garrett from Santa Cruz. My primary point I want to make is PRT is rail and should be included in this study. Scenarios B and E include rail transit. That should include personal rapid transit. Some of personal rapid and transit, the PRT can use monorail, which is technically rail, and it satisfies Proposition 116 funding requirements. One reason our community is divided on the rail corridor is because people are not considering PRT as a form of rail transit. I agree with Campaign for Sensible Transportation to keep the transit option for the rail corridor. I also agree with Santa Cruz Greenway. We need a trail that can handle people at different speeds, people shuffling along with a walker, people racing to school on a bicycle. Everybody needs to be able to use the trail at the speed that they're capable, and that requires a good trail. Personal rapid transit could serve as a drop-in replacement for the light rail transit that's been considered. It could serve the rail corridor in the same stations that are considered in the rail feasibility study. I don't think that's the best PRT system, but that primitive PRT system would offer many advantages over conventional light rail. It's rail without the problems. I mean, look at the challenges identified by the consultants for light rail. Horn noise from the train has raised concerns from residents. PRT does not need horns. Environmentally sensitive areas may be impacted. Mostly fixed, PRT runs overhead. There's poles in the ground, but the rest of it is just overhead. Soil sampling may be fixed, improved at least. Investment for capital, well, we still need that. Could come from SB1, TIRCP, private investors. Funding for operations, PRT is inexpensive to run. Traffic impacts at intersections, fixed. Conflicts with bikes and pedestrians, fixed. And yeah, I guess I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, thank you. And my name's Dan, and I'm a bus driver for the Metro. And I first want to, thank you. First want to draw your attention to the charts that, I printed this off an email, so I can't refer to page number, but it's the charts that are used in the different scenarios with the thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral, all that stuff. These charts. And in scenarios A, B, and C, on these charts, on the SoCal Freedom Corridor, the rating, the overall rating for increased bus transit or increased transit frequency is only a 1 thumb up, even though if you look at the ratings across the individual categories, it should have 2 thumbs up. It has the same average rating as auxiliary lanes, State Park to Freedom in Highway 1, which has 2 thumbs up overall. So I'm wondering why that happened, why that's kind of getting docked there. And then I'm heartened that the staff report seemed to emphasize better bus service on SoCal Freedom Corridor, so maybe that's not even really that much of an issue at this point. The other thing, I just want to mention a cautionary note. I'm glad that we're considering new projects in Santa Cruz County, and it's exciting. It's Christmas season. Everyone wants to find new toys under their Christmas tree, and I think the toy train is really a nice, attractive, sexy idea. That's much sexier than increasing bus service and all that kind of stuff. However, once you've done all your capital improvements, you have to actually fund the continued operation of that. It's easy to fund capital improvements because they get invested in, they get bonded, there's all that kind of stuff. But I know from experience working as an operator of a transit district in Santa Cruz County that it's very hard to get operational funds. If you put a bus a train transit system in here, you're going to have to also consider the feasibility of continually operating it. And I'd like to have that report.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for your work. Good morning, Mr. Porter. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Ed Porter. I represent Santa Cruz PRT, and I believe every one of you, if we did our things right, got a copy of this 20-page proposal. The proposal is not only intended to show Cabrillo College applications, but also to be a case study so that you could consider PRT in many other applications, and in particular in the rail corridor. I want to say that I agree with Mr. Bertrand, who said that technology is going to be the thing that guides our way in this future effort. And PRT is certainly a possibility, that would provide a compromise instead of us having us so fiercely at each other's throats regarding how we use the rail corridor. Fact is that the trail-only people could be quite satisfied if there was an overhead elevated PRT system passing by overhead. And the fact is that for safety purposes, we need those grade separations. Anybody who is in the transportation administration business who wants to have more of the same in terms of the safety record on our highways, as far as I'm concerned, is not performing properly. We need to get the 100% safety record of 0 fatalities and 0 serious incidents that PRT around the world has right now. We need to be going after that. Further, we need to be going after the emission-free nature that PRT offers if it is solar powered. And in fact, those are 2 imperatives that should be overriding all considerations as you plan for our future transportation. So I think Ron Marquez's editorial said it very nicely in the Santa Cruz Sentinel about 6 weeks ago. He said that small is beautiful, or words to that effect, and he said we should be looking at this kind of thing. And he specifically mentioned PRT. And I want to echo Paul Ellerich's comment earlier.
Thank you.
We need rail transportation in the corridor. PRT is it.
Hi, I'm Robert Stevens. I had to go get a permit, so I'm still here talking away at you guys. And I really think it's up to the commissioners to make this study come out so that our community can agree on something. So how does that happen? We need the facts. It's just like a science experiment. You can't move forward without getting the facts. In my mind, the facts are pretty clear. We have 2 trail options in the corridor. Can we look at both of those side by side and look at cost, functionality, and the environmental impact? If we don't have those, it's going to be hard to decide anything. When we look at the train, can we come up with a date when that train would start, what it would cost to build, and what it would cost to operate, and how it's funded? If we just kick the can down the road that someday save this for some maybe train, we're going to get nowhere. We need some numbers so that the community can believe in your decision and how we're going forward. And if you don't give us the numbers, we're just going to be right back here doing the same thing. And you look at our roads, you look at all the traffic around here, we have to come up with some solutions in about 5 years. The auxiliary lanes are going to make a mess on the freeway. There's a lot of people that could utilize bikes. That corridor is precious. And you know, 20 years from now, if somebody wants to put in a train or a freeway there, let that community to decide. We're not negating that. We're not stopping anybody in the future from making any decision about anything. I wish we had our wharfs. I wish we had all the airports. They're all gone because community members made decisions at that time that was right for their community, and you need to make a decision that's right for our community for this time and quit wasting time and money on some of these projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name is Barbara Rutger. I am a citizen of Santa Cruz County, and I take interest in seeing what Santa Cruz, I'd like to see Santa Cruz have the most resilient transportation system. I'm imploring the RTC board to give the trail only a serious look as part of the United Corridor study. The only way that we, the people, the RTC, the commissioners, can fully understand the difference between a trail-only and a rail and trail is by conducting a study of the trail-only independently to give a clear picture of the differences in cost, environmental impact, and how it encourages multitudes of people to use it to commute to Santa Cruz, to commute on. Santa Cruz is a destination for bikers from all over the world. Each year during Bike Week, there is a little challenge to see who can go faster, a bike or a car during rush hour, and from downtown Santa Cruz to the east side or Aptos. I'm not exactly sure where they finish, but bike wins all the time. If there's a dedicated, safe trail, think of how fast people could go there. The cost, I just think it's just important to keep the cost down, respect our taxpayers, and really look into the path of least resistance. as far as not dipping and dipping down into towns and making a segmented trail that's going to cut down thousands of trees and not be safe for pedestrians. If you build it, they will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Hello, my name is Jackie Nunez. I've been a resident of Santa Cruz County for about 18 years now, going on 18 years. And when I first got here, I did a lot of landscaping with Terra Nova, the bicycle landscaping company. And I got to see this town in all different ways and by bike, and it was a great way to just get to know Santa Cruz and the county, because we were all over and pulling trailers. So I have this perspective too as a working resident and actually using bikes to actually do my work. And I just think that the idea of using, I'm for Greenway, and I really like the idea of using it for different purposes. I don't understand about this this freight thing that they're proposing as well, because I don't think that's very feasible. And I just think that there's a lot of things that we could be doing too, just with, as a landscaper, that we could be doing by bike and getting to these areas and just being greener and less greenhouse emissions. A lot of us, what we're doing in these trucks is we're sitting in these trucks idling in traffic half the time when you're going across the county. So I also want to say too that I'm friends with Ivy Young, who has the bicycle composting company here in Santa Cruz, and she just won the supermarket street sweep in the women's division, and she hauled 685 pounds in her bike with trailer. And I'm just saying that it can be done, and if we keep the corridor to bike and pedestrian, I think there's a lot of different uses just beyond recreational that we can be doing. We have PedX, Matt spoke about Seattle, and I also think too that it would be a great corridor for just doing lighter deliveries and everything else. So there's a lot of other implications we can be doing, even working-wise in this county. So please consider it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good morning. My name is Becky Steinbrunner. I'm a resident of Aptos, and I support Mr. Longinotti's suggestion that we incorporate a stakeholder group with some conflict resolution incorporated. We don't need to spend money on lawsuits, and we need to come to a solution in a way that the community will support. I also support Commissioner Bertrand's nod to future technology, and to that end, I want to know why we would want to reduce any options here at all. I think we need to keep all options open, keeping them coming along on the study pike, and with a big nod to the fact that Santa Cruz County is the second most dangerous bicycling county in the state. So we've got to do some protected bikeways to help that. We've got to do some improvements that will effectively help those who are not able to bicycle. And I really think rail could be used for that. I think what's not being talked about is that the rail could be considered a commuter for the Highway 17 people if it connects at Pajaro to those Amtrak and Caltrain options. It is consistent with the state's 2018 rail plan to keep that option open. It is also a nod to 25% of our county's workforce that commutes daily over Highway 17, a very dangerous and in the winter a very hazardous an expensive route for the county to maintain. I want to also bring up that there is no money being put forth for, as the bus driver, thank you for your service, Dan, for maintenance and operation, and also security. We have a bike lane option, but there must be security along there, as we all know if you walk along there. I also want to discuss the option, the aspect of the contaminated soil railroad beds that are a huge expense for any soil disturbance work done in the area.
Thank you, Ms. Steinbrunner.
Also, consider the level of service currently along the main corridors. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Doug Husky. I've lived in Santa Cruz County since 1967. I'm also a Greenway supporter. I just wanted to point out that in scenario A, I think what we're talking about with a bicycle or a trail-only kind of solution is a bicycle network. not just use of the corridor, but a connected series of bicycle improvements. So I question why in scenario A, the protected bikeways on Freedom and Soquel are not an option. I think that that would only make sense. So it looks like the scenarios sort of are a hodgepodge of things. We really have to look at how these projects interconnect with each other and how they support each other. My feeling is that infrastructure for bicycle support would complement a world-class trail use of the corridor where bicycles can go at their speed, people can go at their speed, dog walkers can go at their speed, handicapped people can go at their speed, and you have separated passageway so that you're not creating a safety issue in doing that. So again, I feel like this needs to be considered as a connected network across the entire county, not just along the corridor, but how the corridor connects to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good late morning. It's Fred Geiger, Santa Cruz. Let me start by concluding, but I will take my full 2 minutes. You don't want to dismiss anything or not include anything at this point that may turn out to be quite useful later in reference to what many people recognize Commissioner Bertrand's wise statement about the emerging technology. PRT doesn't appear to be included. This is something that was, unknown, unpracticed largely 5-10 years ago, and now it's emerging. There are several functional systems in the world, like self-driving electric cars. Who knew about those 5 years ago? You don't want to shut the door on something that may become something quite feasible in the near future. As you know, there's a proposal right now for a link up with Cabrillo to other transit with PRT. The advantages of PRT are it's green. It could be 100% solar powered. Instead of running on 6-lane freeways like we have on Highway 1, it can run on little pedestals like streetlights or traffic pedestals every 25 or 30 feet. People tell me, aren't those going to fall down? Have you ever seen the cross arm? I was an electrician extending 35 feet across an intersection with no support except for the pole way over there. No, they're not going to fall down. They have a very strong base. PRT is the solution for a lot of problems. It's a solution for running out of room, as someone mentioned here. There's not much room on our roads. Where are you going to build the new roads? PRT doesn't need roads. It can go on the existing railway line or whatever you want to call it. We should maintain that for sure for whatever accessibility turns out to be the eventuality. It can be in sidewalks. It can take people right downtown. Like I said, it can be 100% solar powered. It's really something you should keep your mind open to. We're not asking you for a commitment. We're not asking you for money. You should like that. And just put it in your plans as a possibility, because like self-driving cars, this could be a technology that in just a few years seems very feasible and serve us quite well. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Marilyn Garrett, I'd like to recommend a documentary called Taken for a Ride. And it's about how the automobile industry, Goodyear Tires, Phillips 66, bought up good public transportation systems that we had decades ago and destroyed them and made us all dependent on their products, the automobile, which has caused vast amounts of environmental destruction and death. It's quite an amazing documentary and lets us know, how did we get here and what were the influential powers? I think we've heard a lot of suggestions, recommendations here on part of the public for you to investigate further. And I'm going back to this comment made at the beginning of the criteria for projects is serving, one of the key ones, serving safety and health. We hear about technology, and there's a group called Citizens for Safe Technology. So the question is this technology that you keep referring to safe or not? And I have provided you with data on the dangers of the wireless microwave radiation that, by the way, is one of the key factors in Senate Bill 649 of why the firemen got an exemption. And that tells you something. The firemen wanted to have a moratorium of antennas emitting radiation on the roof of their buildings or nearby because of the symptoms they were experiencing, being in a brain fog, coordination off, slowed reaction time, dizziness, tremors. You know this radiation is doing that to the firemen. It's a big problem for everyone. Now these...
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you very much.
We have to
Appreciate that.
avoid this technology along trails and corridors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again. I'm Ryan Sarnataro, lived in Santa Cruz for 20 years. My wife and I both are on our bikes a lot. She works out in Aptos. I come downtown a lot. We live in Live Oak. Perfect to have a corridor that would actually get us there. I think part of what we're dealing with here is some level of institutional momentum. The rail corridor was purchased with the promise that there would be rail there. 4 out of the 5 options here are rail options, and it just seems to me that there's a momentum that is causing effects. I mean, even the first bit of the corridor that's going to go in, 1.3 miles, you're going to have those tracks still there. It's going to be hard to get across it. You know, hundreds of people over the course of a decade are going to fall on those tracks. You know, some will end up in the hospital. And there's no reason for them if you don't have a clear vision by which you can actually put a rail system in, and that rail system would actually serve our transportation needs. So I really urge the Commission to put as much focus as is possible on trail options that will give us a proper transportation corridor that doesn't require the wasting of our time and our space on the rails that are left over from the 19th century. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian Peoples, Trail Now. So I want to remind us what we're doing. We're at a stage of the process to do a down selection, right? So the consultants have given a recommended down selection. We're recommending actually based off of what they're recommending is what's feasible, what's truly feasible. And you've heard from the public, you heard from the financial likelihood of a train existing. It's really not feasible. If Zach was here, I'll remind him again, having trains going through the village every 15 minutes, it's not realistic. Okay, so that's where we're at right now, is trying to down select it so our very qualified consultants can do a deep dive analysis on the remaining scenarios. If you go and you add this train scenario and you keep it in the play, that's going to take away from their ability to truly look at what's the best for our community, right? So I would have expected that the consultants would have, with their knowledge and experience, would have had said a train based off of the feedback, the lawsuits, the homeowners that live on the...
Brian, focus your comments to the board. Okay.
Okay. That they would have provided greater detail recommendation. It's really not truly... they're not being professional if they don't give you their true professional opinion. So scenario A and scenario C is what this board is going to be voting on. That's what you're voting on. That's the issue right now. So I'm hopeful that you go and down select, because we're going to wait another year. And the Unified Corridor study is going to sit, the Unified Corridor, Coastal Corridor is going to sit as a vacant lot. Thank you
very much.
Hi again, I'm Jack Nelson. I'm a retired environmental planner and land use planner. I know this county well from that professional work. I'm also a member of the Campaign for Sensible Transportation. I'm the chair of the local Sierra Club Transportation Committee and a concerned resident of planet Earth. I'm still holding this image in my hand because this is still a backdrop for me in thinking about this issue. One thing I really like about the Unified Corridor study is that it's looking at alternatives to single-mindedly widening Highway 1. And that, to me, that's kind of the elephant in the room, is the energy demand of individual passenger vehicles. Rail transit, for instance, per passenger mile is a tiny fraction of the energy demand. And so even if you start to see some fraction of cars on Highway 1 being electric, the energy demand is still there. So we need some kind of alternative to that for masses of people to move, and not all of them will get on a bike. I will, but not everybody. So what do we do about that? People in this room behind me may not be aware that at your last meeting, which wasn't on community TV, your commission, to my surprise and amazement, preemptively endorsed an alternative out of the environmental impact report that's studying widening Highway 1. Your commission voted to bless as the preferred alternative the full 8-lane flavor version of widening Highway 1. To me, that seemed inappropriate to do when the EIR has not been made available yet in its final form to the public. The data there show a failure to fix this. And here we are with these wonderful alternatives that I agree with Rick Longinotti's proposal to convene a stakeholder committee. Thanks.
Hi, Stanley Socolo. I'll be brief because I sent you an email and which pointed out a potential glitch in the legal background, which could relate to feasibility or at least the cost of removing the tracks. And this morning I was alerted to an article in Seattle Times, which I printed out for each of you and one for the director, which explained in more detail that Seattle purchased what they thought was a right-of-way from a train and proceeded to take out the tracks and build a trail. And then they were sued by the property owners along the trail, and they were awarded $140 million because the deed didn't really give the train system ownership of the trail. It only gave them the right to run a train over it. And when they removed the train, then the easement was void, and so they had to compensate the owners for taking their property. It was a federal, property rights taking, which is per se per se is a taking if you occupy their land. So here's a copy of the article. You can read it at your leisure. If I may give it to the administrative assistant.
Thank you, Stanley.
Hello, Commissioners, Chair. I'm Bruce Sawhill, Friends of the Rail and Trail. I once did a calculation of how much all that property on the rail line would be worth at current rates. It's about $800 million, something to think about. Ms. Steinbrunner said that 25% of people commute over the hill. And that's probably about right, but that means that 75% don't. And so pursuing local solutions is a worthwhile thing to do. It's not hopeless. We're not swamped by everybody going over the hill. Thinking about local solutions is helpful. If you've read the California State Rail Plan, which you probably haven't, because it's long and can be tedious, what the gist of it is that California is going big on rail, that they intend to increase the ridership from about between 100 and 200,000 people to between 1 and 2 million. As an example, per day. As an example, BART carries about 500,000, so that's 4 BARTs worth. That's a lot of rail passengers in California's future. There's also accumulating evidence of intermodality, that bikes and trains work very well together. The new SMART system in Sonoma and Marin, a lot of people are bicycling to the train rather than driving their cars. What they thought were underbuilt parking lots are being underutilized. And we think of this as a transportation issue, what to do with the rail corridor. It's really an environmental issue masquerading as a transportation issue. It will be the biggest environmental project in Santa Cruz history, and maybe that's also a lens to view it through. In terms of effectiveness of rail, you've all been in traffic jams on Highway 1. It turns out one rail vehicle of the kind they use in Sacramento can carry about 200 people, and that's about 1 mile of traffic jam. And they can run in doubles and triples when it's crowded, and so 3 of them is 3 miles of traffic jam. That's 2 lanes from Rio Del Mar to 41st. Trains eat jam for breakfast. It's something to think about. Rail banking is a red herring. We should start planning a rail system or possibly a PRT system. I personally don't think that's going to pencil out as well as rail, but we should start planning it right away. We're crowded right now. We don't have to think 30 years in the future we should think about it. Let's think about it now. It takes long enough. Who would run it? Metro would. It's the same union as rail operators and bus operators. No need for another bureaucracy. And then somebody mentioned bridges over major roads. Well, they make fine rail stations and covered bike parking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. I'm Yannicka Strauss, Executive Director of Bike Santa Cruz County, and I'd like to speak a little bit about the specific projects within the scenarios. We support the recommendations to remove the BRT and the shared BRT and bike lane. We don't think that it would improve safety for bicyclists. Additionally, we support bike ped improvements at all intersections in all of the scenarios. If you're going to make any type of bike lane improvement, the intersections need to be looked at as well. We have a couple bottom lines that preserving and expanding our current network and filling gaps in bike lanes across all scenarios before we really start to implement new things. The protected bike lanes on Soquel Avenue and Drive should not be an all or nothing. They should be considered in segments wherever possible. And just to highlight a specific example from Telegraph Avenue in Oakland, 78% increase in bike ridership after that was implemented. Lastly, we greatly appreciate that there's a bike ped path in the rail corridor in all scenarios. We also realize and support continuing to study transit along that corridor because we do feel that it will allow bicyclists who are living a car light or a car free lifestyle to travel further distances. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannicka.
I'm Paul Shellhammer, and I commend you for your fortitude. I and many others worked hard to get Measure D passed. Measure D did pass with an extraordinary level of support, 68% of voters countywide. One of the things you put in Measure D was a commitment that there would be a thorough analysis of passenger rail options in the rail corridor. That commitment was an integral part of the measure. The voters took you at your word and accepted your commitment. Where we are now is that the rail options in Phase 2 of the Unified Corridor Study are the commitment you made to the voters of Measure D. You need to keep your commitment. What you do a year from now, when the Unified Corridor Study is completed and you and the public have all the options spread out before you, is a wide open question. That will be the time for an informed debate, for lengthy and thorough discussion, unbound by any commitments about what happens next, unhurried by any particular deadline. But now is the time to meet the commitments you have made. At the national level, we have a president determined to give erratic a bad name. At the community level, we don't need the same from RTC. I urge you to keep your commitments to complete the job you have begun, to approve the Phase 2 plan before you, and a year from now, to face the big questions in dialogue with the public and with the information provided by the Unified Corridor Study available to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Good morning. My name is Mark Mesiti-Miller. I'm a professional civil engineer and 34-year resident of the city of Santa Cruz. I'm speaking today as the board chair of the Santa Cruz Friends of the Rail and Trail. I also want to just quickly second everything Paul just said. That was a brilliant speech. We've arrived at the midpoint of the Unified Corridor Study. Congratulations. While everyone still feels frustrated at being stuck in gridlock during what is becoming most of the day, seeing step one of the UCS completed has given us all a ray of hope that our transportation system will soon get everyone moving again. It also tells us our Measure D money is being wisely spent. Thank you for being such good stewards of the responsibility entrusted to you. I want to publicly acknowledge and thank two of your staff, Ginger Diker and Grace Blakesley, for their excellent work on this project. They have shown great respect to everyone involved under some very trying circumstances. I've worked with many consulting teams over my career, and based on my interactions with Frederick Ventnor, my participation in one of the focus groups that Mr. Ventnor led, and my review of their interim report you have before you, you are receiving excellent, reliable, and unbiased information about the many ways we can improve our transportation system. Friends of the Rail and Trail unequivocally supports staff's recommendation that you review and approve the results of the Unified Corridor Study, Step 1 analysis, as described in attachments 1 and 2, and staff recommendations for projects and scenarios to be evaluated in Step 2, as described in attachment 3. Ford urges the Commission to stay the course, move ahead, complete the study you have started. Ford can hardly wait for the more detailed analysis and final recommendations coming next fall. Ford is pleased to see that both intersection improvements for bikes and pedestrians and the visionary Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail, also known as the Rail Trail, are included in all future scenarios. Lastly, Ford is very pleased that local rail transit with interregional connections is included in 2 of the 4 remaining scenarios. In light of the recently released state rail plan, it is obvious modern passenger rail transit will be part of our future here and throughout this great state. Thank you.
I think I'm holding you from lunch. Casey Byer from the Santa Cruz Chamber. I want to thank you for your due diligence in following the will of the Measure D voters. And I want to thank your staff for doing the hard lift on what is always a very messy project or process. Our democracy isn't created overnight, and you are doing the right thing by holding these hearings and having these public commentaries. I participated in some of the stakeholder meetings, and your consultant has done a magnificent job of bringing all of the stakeholders into the room, so I compliment you on that. And I want you to continue to do the work. You know, you don't do this type of work and come with a conclusion halfway through. You're committed to the end. I know it's a long process, and the public doesn't really have a lot of patience for processes, but continue to do what you do, and I think Santa Cruz deserves that. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Barry Scott, I live in Aptos, and I want to speak in support of approval of the Phase 1 package that's before you. I'm happy to see scenarios B and E have rail transit in it. And I think back to 2015 in June when I attended my first RTC hearing, and it was a wonderful time because we had before us excellent opportunities to continue researching more carefully scenarios for rail transit. Unfortunately, they picked scenarios E and S, which did not go to Watsonville and didn't make it as far as Pajaro. It's a different time now, though, with the 2018 rail plan. I'm very excited by that. We have in that a connected network vision with funding where Santa Cruz plays a role. I'd like to mention that among the 12 or 13 counties between Sonoma and Mexico along the coast, we're the only one that doesn't have daily passenger rail service. Yet we have a railroad, a working rail line. Now, what's happened since 2015? We have Pajaro Station that's going to be built. If you were listening to Debbie Hale's public comments a month ago, she was talking about her Pajaro Station, or Monterey's Capital Corridor extension, which will connect to Diridon and places beyond, with a station where? At Pajaro, where our rail line ends. There are billions, literally, if it doesn't get reversed, there's billions of dedicated funding for passenger rail service specifically in the 2018 plan. Santa Cruz, the branch line is included in that 2040 vision, and I urge you to keep your eye on passenger rail service with a trail, because that corridor should be multimodal, just like all our other corridors. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Hello again, Commissioners. My name is Pierre Cannon from Ecology Action, and I'd like to applaud the RTC for their work on the Unified Corridor study. Believe this study is important in terms of advancing sustainable transportation in Santa Cruz. I think also, you know, you've heard a lot of divergent views, and especially those views deal with the corridor, the coastal rail corridor. And so we would emphasize that the RTC, you know, have a plan and implementation of a public engagement process that gets the buy-in of these divergent views. So when the product is finished next fall, that it's something that the community can get behind, because obviously there's a lot of issues that people have different opinion on, but if the process is a robust process, I think you'll get more followers and people that you know, believe in the final product. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
McNulty, Greenway. I'd like to start off by thanking the Campaign for Sensible Transportation for working with UCSC students and encouraging them to look at transit options on the SoCal Freedom Corridor. Thank you particularly to Jesus and Kevin for putting together that great presentation. This is actually one thing that I do agree with Mark Messidy-Miller on, is that we need to be focusing on transit-oriented development in our existing commercial corridors. We're talking about in the Unified Corridor, SoCal Freedom, but outside of that, our other commercial corridors, Ocean, Mission, Water Street, the places where we already have mom and pop businesses, people going. It would be the best place to figure out better bus solutions. It's not a place the train can go. It's also places we need protected bicycle lanes. I'd like to look for a moment to LA. There's this terrific website called Streets Blog USA, and they are doing a series on what works in transit. And that whole series is really centering around car sprawl communities, like most American mid-sized cities, not unlike Santa Cruz, where they are finding that it makes much more sense to improve a bus system than to invest in a separate infrastructure project. Particularly in LA, when they invested in light rail, their buses suffered and their overall transit ridership has declined. So they're spending a lot more money on transit and they have fewer people riding it. Transit only works when people ride it. The train, quite honestly, for our county is a dangerous diversion. It is allowing us to cloud the trail-only study. Greenway was actually disappointed with the step 1 of the Unified Corridor process because trail-only was not carefully studied separately and independently of rail with trail. It was mixed together. The public was not given an opportunity to see the difference in cost, in environmental impact, or in the potential to convert people to be bike commuters. Looking at what could happen.
Thank you. You're going to need to wrap up.
Will be less effective. But anyways, please consider studying the train and doing best investments for best practices on the rail corridor.
Thank you, Gail.
I won't take up 2 minutes. You'll get to lunch. Stephen Slade, I'm the Executive Director of the Land Trust. And as you know, we're your partners in this project. We've committed $6 million for matching funds. And we support the staff recommendation for this stage to go to the Unified Corridor study. And honestly, I can't believe the commission would consider removing the study of the rail option, given that you've committed to doing so for years, and that's our expectation. So we encourage you to accept the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Peter Stanger, resident of La Selva Beach. Just want to let you know that the La Selva residents at their board meeting, quarterly meeting, we voted that we did not think a trail solution was a wise idea, and we would like to see a trail-only solution, not a rail solution. Also, I would like to endorse the metro and bus because it is flexible. I don't know what the commissioners think is going to occur, how you're going to keep the rail running along the bluffs in La Selva Beach and other areas as environmental impacts occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. Before I open up to the board, I just want to make one quick comment. And it is, I think what's clear in this is there's lots of different opinions, but one thing we can agree on is what this county really deserves is a unified corridor study, and that's what we're doing. So with that, I'll open it up to, Greg, go ahead.
I got it first, then, okay. Yeah, you know, I'll do this quickly because we do want to, get to vote on it. The state of California is big on railroads right now. They do want to do a lot of transit by railroads. And think of it this way, I'm for the bicycle and I'm for the walking trail and everything, but if we didn't purchase the rail line, it would be much more difficult right now to be even talking about a bicycle-only and a walking-only trail. We purchased that rail line that was going to be abandoned, and probably who knows what would have happened. So that was always an option. The railroad was the reason it was purchased. and that has got to be a part of the future plan. It does say freight only for Watsonville if you look in there closely. I want to see passenger service as an option in the future for Watsonville. More than just verbal, I want to see it in writing. But I'm starting to agree more and more with you know, these groups that are talking about sensible transportation, and adding auxiliary lines and adding lanes to Highway 1 is not going to solve the problem. We have to have alternative ways to get back and forth between populated areas and getting people to work and giving them options. The bus is one. The railroad could be part of that in the future. Might not look like the railroad that we're seeing today, but some kind of transportation that is moving on those tracks. And the population center of Santa Cruz County in a couple of years could be District 4. District 4, without the population growth in District 4, Watsonville, the county of Santa Cruz would have lost population between the year 2000 and the year 2010. It was the growth in Watsonville and a little bit in the Santa Cruz city that accounted for almost all the growth. The other places were losing population. So Watsonville has to be included in everything, and Watsonville might be the center of transportation in the future. So we cannot ever consider even ignoring them or leaving them out of anything. So that's what I want to say.
Mr. Schiffer and then Mr. Bertrand. Go ahead.
I want to thank everyone who testified today. I think it was, for me, very useful hearing from the various perspectives. It seems to me that some people feel they, on both sides, both who want the trail only and who want the rail, that they already know the answer, and then there are people who feel that they need more information. And I think as a commission, we've made the decision thus far that we need more information, and that's what this process is all about, is to get some information about the options that are most of public concern at this time, get some analysis, get some numbers on costs, on congestion, and deal with the kinds of issues so that when the commission gets to the point of making a decision on which way it wants to go, whether reaffirming the decisions that were previously made or moving in a new direction, it will have before it an apples and apples comparison of what the current situation is. So based on that, I would like to move the staff recommendation that we move forward with step 2 of the Unified Corridor Study process.
Okay, I have a motion by Schiffer and a second by Bertrand. We'll continue the discussion with Commissioner Bertrand.
So I'd like to start off and echo what our Vice Chair just mentioned. We are committed to the Unified Corridor Study. And when you first saw me here as a member of the RTC, I mentioned that the Unified Corridor Study is something that we, in a way, all do. The staff of the RTC, our contractors, our experts in transportation, they're working together to put a lot of options on the table and vet out all the issues that, through the stakeholder meetings, et cetera, the public is bringing to our attention. But it really is all of us together. So I'd like to bring up an idea that I think was mentioned a little while ago, a stakeholders meeting. And I don't want to discuss it right now. This is not the time. I want to make a vote. But I would like to ask staff to put it on a future agenda that we actually address what is going to be the intensive public outreach program. The intensity really needs to match this particular journey we are on. I think that's what we need to do to keep the public's confidence in what the eventual result may be. As said earlier, we're sort of halfway in this process. Casey from the Chamber said that, and we are. We don't know what the outcome's going to be, but all of us are here talking, talking about our concerns because we want to make sure the points that we feel are important are addressed. Stakeholder meetings allows for a public discussion in a different kind of environment. Well, take for instance, I'm from Capitola. Okay, Greenway says we're going to have thousands of walkers and riders. Well, you all know what Capitola is like when it's gridlocked. Are we going to have thousands of walkers and riders come down that trail? So we need to vet out these issues and come up with solutions that make them work. In Kimberly Horn's presentation, you read all the detail. Okay, just running the train is going to cost a lot of money and may provide, and we may have to have another, bond measure or whatever, tax increment. So these are the things that we are going to be addressing for the next year. And with those comments, I would like to continue later on this issue.
Commissioner Hagan, then Brown.
I was one of the persons that originally voted for the rail concept, partly because I saw in the future a possibility of me getting back and forth from here to Watsonville rather quickly and nicely. But I also saw the situation where we would connect in Pajaro with the rail coming up the old El Monte and have the possibility of getting to wherever I wanted to go in this country. And my wife and I are going to be using the rail from in the next year to get back east. I said then I doubt that it will be completed by the time I die. I'm the oldest guy on this board. I just cannot see the idea of wanting to do away with a major force of our country's growth dissolve. A comment was made about Los Angeles. Well, I lived in LA when they tore the rails out. I was a little kid. They're putting them back in because they are needed. And yes, they are growing in use constantly. So please, we made a commitment in 2009 as a staff, as a board. Our nation, our county, our people need us to maintain what we set out to do. Please keep our promises. Thank you.
Commissioner Brown.
So I'm going to support the motion, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments that may not be captured in our vote today. First, I just want to thank everybody who's been involved in this process, the community, our staff, for guiding us along to get to this step 2. So I just want to make comments on a couple of two things. One, it's taken me 20 years to come around to the idea that we might consider personal rapid transit as a possibility in our future. So I just wanted to say that, and I really look forward to talking more with you all. The proposal you sent us was thoughtful. I've had some conversations, and I do think that your point about this being potentially a part of our future, in whether it's on the rail line or some of the other scenarios that you're presenting to us, I'd like to continue that conversation. So thank you for that. And I also believe that over the next year, while we engage in this step 2 of the process, that I do want to ensure and facilitate as much community engagement as possible. I mean, I think that needs to happen, and thank you all for your thoughtful comments thus far. I look forward to continuing that conversation with you all. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got a motion and a second. I'll take a comment from Commissioner McPherson, then Rios, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody who participated, not unexpectedly, and I don't like the time that it's taken, but in reality, we're doing what we said we'd do with Measure D, and it's going to take time, more time than all of us would want, I think. I also wanted to reemphasize, I want to see what the impact on Metro would be with the rail system too. I mean, what's the net gain going to be in public transit or not? I think it's going to be an important measurement that we're going to have to be discussing in the future. And just for question, will we have the information to determine today what's the best use of the corridor or the corridor today and preserve the system, the options for the future? And we've got to mix and match those two things, I think. And I hope we get to that point, and I don't think that that can be answered, but I'd like to surely make sure that we can determine the best use of the corridor today and then and preserving the options of the future at the same time.
Commissioner Rios.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to thank you, all of you, for being here. I know it takes time to come and speak, and also for the staff. And the report, I'm not going to say a lot that's been said already. It's taken 17 years to be here since this started way back. And a lot of us at that time had less gray hair, but we were here, present. I'm glad that we're moving forward. Every day that we travel on Highway 1 to come here, it takes 2 hours for us coming from down south, and 2 hours to going down south. From south to north and north to south takes 2 hours. I just got back from El Salvador, tiny little country that could fit 40 times in California. And I remember at one time taking rail to, my father took us to a place to see a family. I asked the place where we went and the people that were hosting us from our sister city, what happened to the rail line? And they said they took it out. And I said, you think that was a good thing? He goes, no, because look at the gridlock. The gridlock was incredible to have, you have seen a country that's such a tiny little country, and the roads are just 2 roads. I think some of us have been in third world countries, they're like that. But I remember when that rail line that was there was taken out, and what I saw this time of the gridlock, I just kept thinking, I kept telling my friends, I go, well, we got gridlocks where I'm coming from. It's like this, and we have big, huge roads, and we still got gridlocks. And the bigger that we make them, the more bigger they get, and the more cars they get. And it's just incredible, I tell them, because they have this view of the United States, right? And I said, in our area, as small as we are, a county, as small as in the state, we also have so much gridlock. And we're talking about rail. We talk about alternative transportation. So for them, a lot of them, it's hard for them to believe because they see all these movies, But the reality is that for people that commute back and forth here, we see that every day. And just last week, the Legal City was having our regular board meeting here in the Chaminade, and there was a big discussion about SB1 and what we were going to do if there was going to be a ballot measure put next year. And the board took a vote, and the vote was 29-11. Okay, 29-11. 11 people said they didn't want us to put priority on preserving SB1. And a lot of those votes came from down south in California, where the big roads are and all of that stuff. So it tells you, that even what's going on in the state after we have SB1, all the things it's going to bring. So for us here to have this opportunity, I think we have to move forward, and we have to do it. And I also agree with all the comments that we have to come together and be more civil than what is going on today with our president. So thank you.
Commissioner Johnson, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have a final comment?
I guess so, very quickly. Excuse me. Thank you for showing up today. I think that, as representatives of the people, it's our job. We can't treat this, you often hear that people say, government should treat any particular subject or project like a business, but if we did that, we wouldn't have transit. We wouldn't have affordable housing. We wouldn't have lots and lots of things. But there does come a time when we actually do have to make hard decisions that just aren't somewhere out in the future that, and I kind of put, keep all options open. That can be an infinite sort of proposition, because sometimes as leaders, you have to kind of narrow options instead of expanding them, because that's what business people do. So there is a time for us to act like business people.
I just think that I just want to point out very quickly that I think the people here that spoke today that want to do things like personal rapid transit and keep open the possibility of technology improvements from batteries to pedal-assisted bikes and whatever is going to be huge. We're not studying buggy whips here because cars came into the future. We kind of have to look past what we have now and into the future. So I'm hopeful that maybe it's not specifically noted here, but I believe self-driving cars, battery technology, which is improving 5 to 10% each and every year, is going to be huge in terms of the environmental impacts it has. And that's why widening Highway 1 obviously is going to make sense. Batteries will revolutionize the way we travel, especially in cars and so forth. So I want to stop.
Thank you for those comments. Okay, we have a motion by Schifrin and a second by Bertrand. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much for all your comments. Appreciate it. We're going to go back and pick up item 22 just to get back in order. So.
What time do we come?
Yeah, we got it.
That's what, I just want, we're going to clarify that we're going to have a quorum and we're going to, are we going to take a lunch break?
Okay.
Okay, but an alternate, by the rules we have Rosenberg's, right?
Correct.
And Rosenberg, we're going to have to get county council. Alternates count as far as quorum
Absolutely.
and
No,
vote.
I think we're still
Then we're okay.
Were you planning on breaking, or were we planning on working through?
It's up to you.
I'm planning on working through unless there's
Could I make a suggestion, or at least ask a question, staff a procedural question? Is there any reason why we have to vote on either item 25 or 26 today? That's the RTP or the Cruise 511? They be put off to our next meeting?
There is a reason to have to vote them on both of those, as the RTP. The AMBAC already released their version of the MTP, which includes the RTP, so we have to follow suit on that for our portion. And on the Cruise 511, the city of Santa Cruz is planning to move forward on that on a partnership. So.
I'm pretty confident we can motor through these, Andy. I'd like to try to just whip
Okay,
through
could I
them.
make a suggestion that we not get staff reports? We just assume everybody's read the material that we've
Well, you know what? Grace is good at this. I think if I tell her to give me a brief staff report, and Ginger also, I'm sure that if I ask you to give me a brief one, you've done that before. So I'm pretty confident we can mow through this. So I'm going to give it a try. If everybody wants to bear with me here.
Postpone it or?
No, we're going to keep going. We're going to go right through. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's go with item 22. And is there a staff report?
I will, in the interest of time, I will go ahead and take that and it's a long staff report, but I'll boil it down to the recommendation, which is basically the staff and the ad hoc committee that was appointed by this commission approved that you adopt a policy stating that Santa Cruz Metro will receive 100% of SDA funds in fiscal year 17-18, 18-19, 85% in fiscal year 19-20, and 80% fiscal year 20-21, and 75% fiscal year 21-22, and that would include STA funds as well as the new State of Good Repair funds that are part of SB1.
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay. And I just want to add a comment. Commissioner Bertrand and myself are on that ad hoc committee, 100% in compliance with Metro and the staff. And the only the language that was in there that there's any discussion on is whether it's actual or projected. And I think it'd be better if it was just actual, because we're unsure about those revenue funds and what they actually are. So I think actual is a better number than projected.
I'd just like to make comment. Yeah, I think Ed asked the idea of an ad hoc committee. I think moving forward, if there's any issues, I think this is a great approach. RTC staff and Metro staff, it was almost a flawless discussion, so I really think it was a great mechanism.
Motion was by Brown, second was by?
Me.
Okay, good. So all in favor?
Well, we have to ask if the public, if there's
I'm sorry,
anybody in the
thank you,
public
Mr.
who wants to
Schifrin.
speak.
Anybody from the public like to weigh in on these proposals? Thank you, Jack, for not weighing in. Okay, we'll bring that back and we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. That'll take us to number 25. Ginger, go ahead.
I will follow the lead of Deputy Director Mendez here and stick just to the recommendations. I have 3 recommendations to make on the 2040 Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Plan. To review and provide input on the draft 2040 Regional Transportation Plan. There will be an additional time on January 18th at the RTC meeting to solicit your input. The second recommendation is to authorize staff to release the draft 2040 Regional Transportation Plan for public review starting tomorrow, December 8th, and that would go to February 5th, 2018. And the third recommendation is to schedule a public hearing on the draft Regional Transportation Plan for the January 18th, 2018 RTC meeting.
Any questions from the commission? Okay, I'll go open it up to the public. Does anyone from the public would like to weigh in on this? Seeing none, we'll bring
Move
it
the
back.
staff recommendations.
Motion by Schifrin, second by Rios. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Takes us to item 26.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Cruise 511, Anais or someone else making this?
Again, I
Luis.
will take this one in the interest of time. This is simply a budget amendment to the Cruise 511 portion of the RTC's fiscal year 17-18 budget to be able to do a partnership with the city of Santa Cruz in a pilot project to use the Scoop pilot program to do better marketing and incentivizing of shared rides into the downtown Santa Cruz area. So anybody that's coming to work or to downtown Santa Cruz from any parts of the county will be part of the program. And so that's all that is here before you today.
Any questions of staff? We'll open it up to the public. Anyone from the public like to weigh in on Cruise 511? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a
Move the
recommendation.
staff recommendation.
And again, with Schifrin, Bertrand, any
Could I make a
discussion?
quick comment? I think this
Absolutely.
really fits into the notion of using new technologies, and it really offers an opportunity to make the ride-sharing program more robust. So I think it's a good direction to move in, and I'm happy to.
Well, then I'm glad Bertrand had the second, because I heard his name mentioned numerous times a day with technology. So thanks. So with that, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. So that'll bring us to a review of items to be discussed in closed session. Brooke?
That is correct. There is one item under closed session for you. It's a conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation, to consider litigation for one case.
Do we expect to report anything out?
No.
Okay, well then we will go ahead and adjourn to closed session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are we going to go in there or stay here? Stay right here, okay.
We're staying.
Remain right here. Well, I think we can do that. Brooke, I'm very confident.
Let's go.